So you divorced someone like me, an elite, and then remarried an unemployed man? My ex-husband Brian's voice echoed through the fancy restaurant. Sitting next to him was the woman he had an affair with. She looked at us, covering her mouth as if trying to hide her laughter. Well, I guess someone like you, a divorced nurse, can only marry an unemployed man. Is this your husband? He's so plain-looking. Perfect for you, Brian said. My current husband stepped forward to protect me. Please stop. I won't let you make fun of Mary anymore. Oh, here comes the unemployed husband, Brian mocked. Do you even know who I am? I know exactly who you are, my husband replied. His words made Brian freeze. My name is Mary, I'm 27 years old, and I've been married for 2 years. I've been working as a nurse, which has always been my dream. My life is busy but fulfilling, I explained. Hey Mary, look at this, Brian, my husband, called to me in the morning, holding a bundle of papers with a happy expression on his face. What's going on? I asked. Wow, that's amazing, I said as I saw the company newsletter from the advertising agency where Brian worked. The headline read, Sales Department's Rising Star. There was a photo of Brian with a proud smile and an interview. I'm in trouble, they featured me again, Brian said, unable to hide his happiness. Brian was an elite. He had graduated from a well-known university and worked at a major advertising agency. That's amazing, Brian, I'm so happy for you, I said. Brian smiled. Well, as a nurse, you probably can't imagine this glamorous world. As I struggled to find the right words, Brian tightened his tie and said, I'll be late tonight because of a business dinner. I don't need dinner, see you, I replied. Okay, take care, Brian said before leaving. We were introduced through a mutual friend and eventually got married, but over time, Brian started belittling my nursing job. At first, he helped around the house and was kind, but recently, I've been doing all the chores. When I asked him to help with housework once, he replied, I'm a salesman, you're just a nurse, even you should know who has the harder job. When we were dating, Brian was kind, and everyone admired us as a couple. It would be a lie to say I didn't feel secure being with an elite. I grew up in a single-parent family, and my mother had already passed away, so I longed for my own family. I felt I needed to have a serious talk with Brian. With that thought in mind, I went to work that day. Good morning, did you sleep well? Let me take your temperature, I greeted Mr. Green, a patient who had been hospitalized after a car accident. Good morning, thanks to you, I slept well, he replied. Mr. Green was a bit older than me, but he loved playing video games and often played them while in bed. He always thanked me for helping him and spoke politely, which made me happy. It's rewarding when patients appreciate your work. I worked hard all day, from morning until evening. On my way home, I realized that Brian's birthday was coming up soon. Since he said he would be late tonight, I thought it would be a good idea to pick out his gift before going home. I also decided to have dinner alone, so I took a train in the opposite direction, chose his present, had dinner, and was about to head home. When I saw a man in a suit I recognized, I realized it was Brian. However, he was with a slender woman with long brown hair, who was snuggling up next to him. Something didn't feel right. Didn't he say he had a work dinner tonight? My heart raced with anxiety as I followed them from a distance. They walked hand in hand, then entered a hotel together. It felt like everything went dark in front of me. I sat down on the side of the road. It couldn't be true. Brian was cheating on me. All the times he dressed up, came home late, and kept fiddling with his phone. I thought it was for work, but it wasn't. Brian had betrayed me. Somehow, I made it home. I sat alone in the dark living room, lost in my thoughts. When Brian came home, he didn't even turn on the lights. He did it when he saw me sitting there. Hey, Mary, what's the matter? He asked. I didn't turn on the lights either. Sit down, I said, feeling numb. Brian sighed. I'm tired, I want to go to bed. Just sit down, I repeated, glaring at him. Reluctantly, Brian sat. I asked him, Brian, you're cheating on me, aren't you? I saw you today. He seemed surprised at first, but then sighed and said, Is that all? Yeah, I have another girlfriend. She's a receptionist at work, popular for being cute. Can't help it, I'm popular. I was shocked by his honesty. What are you saying? He looked at me coldly and said, You should be grateful I've stayed with someone like you. You don't have much going for you. Your face isn't special. You're just a nurse, and you have no parents. Why should I stay with someone like you? I was speechless. He continued, It doesn't matter now. I kept you around as a housekeeper, But you're no longer needed. Pack your things and leave. He went to the bedroom, leaving me in shock. I couldn't sleep that night, devastated by his words, but I still had to go to work. I left the house before him and tried to do my best at work, even though I felt like I was struggling. Mr. Green, one of my patients, noticed something was wrong. Did something happen? You look pale, he said, staring at my face while holding a game console. I'm fine, really. I tried to laugh it off, not wanting to worry Mr. Green. It's disgraceful for a nurse to be upset by a patient. Mr. Green shook his head and said, don't ever call yourself a disgraceful nurse, even as a joke. I think I can be discharged today, thanks to your care. I can't ask what happened, but you'll be okay. You deserve happiness. His words, you deserve happiness, gave me the encouragement I needed. Holding back my tears, I bowed to Mr. Green in gratitude. That day, I packed my things, left the completed divorce papers, and moved out of the house. The next day, Brian called. I filed the divorce papers. Understood? Now you're just a divorcee with no parents and an ugly nurse. Good luck being happy. Goodbye. I couldn't stand hearing his mocking voice any longer, so I hung up, and with that, our divorce was finalized. For about a year after that, I threw myself into my work even more. I requested a transfer to a busier department, leaving me no time to feel lonely. Maybe it was for the best. One day, I was out shopping and ran into a familiar face at the park on my way home. Ah, Mr. Green, I said. Oh, it's been a while. Thanks to you, my health has improved a lot, Mr. Green said, sitting on a park bench and playing a game. I smiled at him. We chatted for a while, and I told him about finding out about my husband's affair and how his encouragement had helped me through the divorce. Mr. Green seemed surprised. That must have been tough. You did well to get through it. Thank you, I said. I've been holding on to your words, you'll be okay, like a charm. On my way home that day, Mr. Green invited me to dinner. We exchanged contact information, and even though we went home that night, we continued to go on several dates afterward. Eventually, I agreed to start a relationship with Mr. Green, now Sam. Sam and I were able to go on dates, even during the weekdays. In other words, he didn't seem to have a job. Even so, he always treated me to meals. At first, I found Sam's lifestyle a bit mysterious, but what I liked most was his personality. He was always relaxed, calm, and polite to everyone, treating me with great care. His hobby was gaming, and although I had never played before, I started joining him when we played together. Sam was clearly being easy on me, but I appreciated his kindness. A year after we started dating, Sam proposed. I'm not beautiful, and I don't have any parents. Are you sure this is okay? I asked him. Sam seemed a bit troubled and said, Mary, you're still hurt from your previous marriage, aren't you? But you're a wonderful woman. Let's become a family and live happily together. His words made me so happy. I felt ready to remarry, and this time I was sure it would be okay. Being with Sam made me much happier than I had ever been with Brian. A year passed, and Sam and I got married. Our relationship was still strong. For our wedding anniversary, Sam suggested we go to a special French restaurant. It's a special day, he said with a smile. The restaurant was high-end, even a place I had heard of before. I asked, is it really okay to go to such an expensive place? Of course it is, Sam said. It's a special day. We usually ate at home or went out for Japanese food, which we both loved, so this was a nice change. We dressed up and went to the restaurant, enjoying the delicious food and celebrating our anniversary. It was a blissful evening. Suddenly, I heard a familiar voice. Mary, hey, is that you? I looked up and saw Brian, the last person I ever wanted to see again. Next to him was the woman he had cheated on me with, her arm linked to his. What do you want? I asked coldly. Brian rudely stared at Sam and me. It was clear Sam instantly understood the situation. If you have nothing to do with me anymore, then please leave, I said, but Brian didn't move. Instead, he said something outrageous. How can someone like you afford to be in such a high-end restaurant? Sam responded calmly, today is our wedding anniversary. We can dine wherever we want. Huh, wedding anniversary? Brian mocked. So, the poor couple splurged and came to a place like this? How touching. Brian smirked, and the woman next to him, who had been his affair partner, covered her mouth and looked at us with amusement. After all that had happened, Brian looked at me and said, "After divorcing me, you married a jobless man, huh?" Completely ignoring Sam, I was stunned. "Huh, what's that? Where did you hear that?" "I ran into one of your colleagues and heard it," Brian said with a smirk. "They said you're going on dates even on weekday afternoons, and they've never seen your partner wearing a suit. They also said he's a gamer." "Is this your jobless husband?" "He's a fittingly dull man for you." Brian kept mocking me, and I was too shocked to respond. "Well, a divorced nurse like you can only marry a jobless man, huh? You must be supporting this old man." "Good for you." "Hey, stop it," I said, but Brian wasn't done. "You know, a high-end restaurant like this doesn't suit a poor couple like you. You must have saved up all your pennies just to come here. But read the room. You're lowering the tone." Brian's cruel words echoed through the restaurant, and before long, we became the center of attention. He had always belittled me when we were married, and now he was mocking my husband, Sam. I couldn't take it anymore. I won't forgive him, I thought, reaching my breaking point. I tried to stand up, but Sam stepped in front of me to shield me. "Please stop. I won't allow you to make fun of Mary any further," Sam said firmly. Brian, trying to hold back laughter, mocked us. "Oh, the jobless husband has appeared. Even jobless, you'll defend your ugly wife, huh?" "Watch your mouth," Sam replied. "You two should be the ones to leave. Just go." Brian glared at Sam and said, "Don't you dare stand up to an elite like me when you're just a jobless old man. I don't care if you're an elite or whatever. Just leave," Sam said, unyielding. Brian's face twisted with irritation as he said, "Hey, don't you know who I am? I'm the #1 salesman at S Advertising, and I graduated from W University. S Advertising makes TV commercials for K Foods and M Games. I'm on a completely different level from a jobless nobody like you. You have no right to speak to me." Sam paused for a moment and then spoke in a low voice. "I know who you are very well. Now, who do you think I am?" Brian was momentarily confused. "Huh? There's no way. I know exactly who you are," Sam said calmly. The woman next to Brian, who had been quiet until now, gasped, wait a minute, isn't this guy Sam Green?" "Who's Sam Green?" Brian asked, clearly confused. The woman quickly explained, "He's the founder of M Games. He graduated from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and became a top figure in the gaming industry in just 10 years. He's a genius engineer and entrepreneur." "What?" Brian's face turned from red to blue as he processed this. Sam spoke again, straight-faced. "Yes, I am Sam Green, the founder of M Games. I'm currently the chairman, having stepped back from day-to-day management." I realized that Sam was the founder of the super-famous game company, M Games. Suddenly, everything made sense: his free time on weekdays, his constant gaming. "Wait, M Games is one of our major clients," Brian said, now pale and trembling. "You're the one who handles all our TV commercials and magazine ads. The advertising budget must be in the billions." "That's right," Sam said with a smile. At that moment, Brian and the woman next to him bowed their heads, clearly shaken. "We're so sorry, please forgive us. We had no idea you were the chairman of M Games." Sam replied coolly, "You're apologizing to the wrong person. You should be apologizing to Mary." Brian turned to me and bowed deeply. The woman looked at him in shock. "Miss Mary, I'm so sorry for what happened when we were married and for today. Please forgive me." I almost laughed at how pathetic Brian looked, but managed to hold it in. Sam asked, "Mary, what will you do?" I replied, in a calm but firm tone, "No, it's impossible to forgive him. Please don't ever show up in front of us again," I said firmly, and Sam grinned, giving me a small thumbs up. Then he bent down and whispered in Brian's ear, "Mary is a perfect wife for me. I'll make her happy from now on, so you should worry about your own future." Brian, pale and trembling, and the woman next to him quickly left, their tails between their legs. Sam and I continued our meal. I smiled at him, and he spoke gently, "Let's continue enjoying our meal." We had a peaceful evening. 6 months later, Sam instructed M Games to stop working with S Advertising. He reported Brian's horrible attitude, and as a result, Brian was fired. His elite career was probably over. To make things worse, the woman who had been about to remarry Brian gave up on him and left. Now, Brian was alone, living in a shabby apartment, but that was none of our concern. As for us, we had recently found out I was pregnant. Sam was so happy that he jumped up and down. He had also returned to game development after a long break and was now focusing on making games that could be played with children. Watching Sam, I hoped that this happiness would last forever.
Come over here quick. Jackson just called me out of the blue and said he threw Mom out of the house. He wants me to deal with her now, I explained, feeling confused and surprised. What? That's awful. He really kicked Mom out. Come and see for yourself, Jackson urged. Oh, when I let her take Dad's memorial tablet. Why would he be so mean? Now that there's no money left from Dad's stuff, he doesn't want Mom around anymore. He sees her as a problem. I couldn't believe it. It turns out Dad had debts, and after paying them off, there wasn't any money left for us. I had no idea about this, and to make things worse, Jackson and his wife had been living in our family home all this time. It felt incredibly unfair. It's getting dark soon. If you don't come to pick her up, Mom will be sleeping on the streets. How could you be so cruel? I will never forgive you for this, Jackson, I said, feeling upset. I don't need your forgiveness. That's just too harsh, Jackson replied, hanging up without listening to me. He didn't answer any of my subsequent calls. When I finally got through to Mom, she confirmed everything Jackson had said. Angry at him and worried for Mom, I had no choice but to drive over to where she was. Let me introduce myself. I'm Lily, I'm 27 years old, and I'm in a hurry. 3 years ago, I married Mason, who's also 27, and we've been living together since. At first, we lived with my parents in our family home. But 2 years ago, my brother Jackson and his wife suddenly moved in. They claimed the house was too crowded with us there, so we had to leave. Jackson, who's 8 years older than me, has always been selfish, but his marriage seems to have made him even worse. Our family home, where I grew up, is a big house with a lot of space and land. It's been passed down from my grandfather. There's no reason we can't all live comfortably together. I wasn't happy about the situation and tried to talk to Jackson about it, but my husband, who doesn't like arguing, convinced us to leave. Around that time, my dad got sick with liver cirrhosis, and it was already pretty bad. I wanted to be there for him in his last days, but I couldn't. His illness got worse quickly, and he passed away a month ago. It's really hard not knowing that my mom must be feeling even worse than me, dealing with my brother treating us this way right after losing Dad. It's just sad. An hour later, when we got to our family home, Mom was sitting sadly on a suitcase in the garden. The front door was locked. Jackson had taken her keys. I used my keys to unlock the door and went inside with Mom. Jackson and Olivia were lounging on the sofa, watching TV like nothing was wrong. What's going on? How did you get in? Jackson asked, acting like he didn't know what was going on. I used my key to open the front door. Isn't it obvious? I replied, feeling frustrated. It slipped my mind. Leave your key, take the old lady, and go. This isn't funny. How can you be watching TV after kicking your own mother out of the house? Besides, if the house remained even after Dad's debts were paid off, Mom has a right to live here. I shot back, getting more and more angry at Jackson's attitude. I stood in front of the TV. Mom has a right to inherit this house. If you can't live with her, you should be the one to leave, Jackson, I said firmly. Shut up. This house is mine. Dad gave it to me when he was alive. Don't act smart without knowing anything, Jackson retorted defensively. What do you mean? There's no way Dad gave this house to you, Jackson, before he died, Mom interrupted, looking confused and shaking her head. Seeing our confusion, Jackson smirked and stood up from the sofa, pulling out an envelope from a room in the back. Look at this. What's this? It's proof that I inherited this house, Jackson declared proudly. The envelope contained documents proving his inheritance, prepared by a legal writer, and his real estate ownership certificate. He explained that the property had been transferred to his name a month before Dad passed away. Mom and I were stunned as we examined the documents. Why would Dad do something like this? I sighed, gazing at his picture. Why would Dad hand over the house to Jackson without talking to Mom about it? Because I'm his favorite, obviously. I convinced him that Mom would get the house after he passed away. So he gave it to me while he was still alive, Jackson bragged. That can't be. I refused to believe it. Wake up and see the truth, Mom argued. No matter how many times we looked at the document, the property was indeed in Jackson's name. All this fuss over a house, my mom muttered in disbelief. Is there nothing else left for Mom? No other inheritance? Be grateful that the debts are paid off. This can't be happening. You're not just worried about Mom, you realize there's no inheritance for you either, right? Jackson sneered. The bank card he handed over had only a few dollars on it. I wasn't expecting Dad's inheritance, but it was a shock to find out he left me nothing. This is too harsh, I thought. To make things worse, Olivia was laughing at us, enjoying our misery. Just leave. You poor people don't belong here, she mocked. Jackson and Olivia pushed us out of the house forcefully. Ouch, that hurts. Mom cried out as she fell and scraped her hand. Blood started to trickle out, so I quickly wrapped it with my handkerchief. Tears of frustration rolled down my cheeks. Seeing me upset, my mom gently wiped away my tears. Her eyes were filled with sadness too. Mom, our place is small, but you can stay with us, I offered. But I don't want to bother Mason. I'll find somewhere else to stay, Mom protested. Don't worry, I can't just leave you like this. I'm going to call Mason right now. Just wait, I assured her. Wiping away my tears, I grabbed my cell phone and dialed my husband's number. Mason answered after a few rings. Hello? Mason, I'm sorry to bother you out of the blue. Mom has been kicked out of her house, I explained. As I told him what happened, Mason listened attentively, though he seemed a bit unsure. I held my breath, waiting for his response. Our apartment is pretty small compared to Mom's house. It might not be the most comfortable, Mason started, but I don't mind. Bring your mom over. We've been helped out in tough times too. We should help each other when we can. Thank you so much, Mason, I said gratefully. My husband is such a kind person. He couldn't leave someone in need. We quickly took Mom to our apartment, and from that day on, we lived together. But living with 3 people in our small apartment was tight. We didn't have enough money saved up to buy a house yet, but maybe moving to a slightly bigger place in the future would be a good idea. It was heartbreaking to see Mom squeezed into our small apartment. As my husband and I browsed through property listings on the computer, Mom's phone rang. After a brief conversation, she dropped a bombshell. Why don't we move to my Highlands condominium? She suggested. Hold on, what Highlands condominium? I asked, completely surprised. Mom went on to explain that my wealthy grandfather had been a big spender, leaving my grandmother with no choice but to sell their farmland to keep up. As for Dad, he was also known for spending a lot. And besides the house, we didn't have many assets. Worried about our future, Mom had wisely invested her earnings from before she got married in real estate. My husband and I were floored. It turns out, Mom not only owned a condominium in the Highlands, but also managed an apartment building, earning a significant income from her investments. I can't believe it. I'm sorry for not telling you sooner, Mom apologized. Anyway, the management company just called. There's an opening in the Highlands condominium. We can move in next month. What do you think? She proposed. We couldn't refuse such a generous offer. Plus, the Highlands condominium had 3 bedrooms, a living room, a dining room, and a kitchen, all just a 5-minute walk from the station. It was much more comfortable than our current situation. Thank you, Mom, but we might only be able to afford the same rent as we do for the apartment. I expressed my concern. You don't need to worry about that. We have to do things properly even if we're family, my mom insisted. Oh, I need to let the landlord know we're moving out. Seeing my husband and me smiling with happiness, Mom's face lit up too. Time flew by as we got ready to move into our new home at the Highlands condominium. Before we knew it, 2 months had passed since we settled in. As I was getting ready to go shopping, I was surprised to see the Jackson couple suddenly appear at the entrance of the condominium. Why are you, a poor person, living in the Highlands condominium? Did you come into some money or what? Olivia sneered. Of course not. The Highlands condominium has always belonged to my mom, I replied firmly. Both Jackson and Olivia were shocked. What? They exclaimed together, staring up at the tall building. I couldn't help but laugh at their confused and silly expressions. Jackson's face turned red with anger. That deceitful woman. I can't believe she kept this from us while pretending to be poor. My mom never said she was poor. You just assumed that, Jackson. Plus, she inherited a big house. What's wrong with that? I argued. That's not the point. Don't chat here. It's rude to the other people living here. And how did you know I was here? Jackson demanded. Jackson said that when he couldn't reach Mom, he tracked her down using her phone's location. Olivia explained. Why are you trying to contact Mom now after kicking her out? I bet something mean again, I accused. Regardless, if Mom is here, I want to see her. Let me in now, Jackson demanded. You must be kidding. If you hurt Mom again, I couldn't stand it. If you have something to say, tell me, I insisted. But they kept pushing to see my mom without saying why. The Jackson couple seemed quite flustered. Weren't you two living comfortably in your big family house, just the two of you? I questioned. It's none of your business, Jackson snapped. Fine, if you don't want to tell me, that's okay. I have to go now. Bye, I said, trying to walk past them. But Jackson suddenly grabbed my arm tightly. Ouch, let me go, I protested. Just call Mom. Absolutely not. I'll call the police, I threatened. But Jackson just scoffed at me. There's no way the police would come for a simple family argument. Even if they did, there's no way you could sue me for just grabbing your arm. Feeling defeated, I stayed quiet. Fine, I'll tell my mom, but only if you tell me why you're here, I relented. The utility bills for that house are ridiculous. Just for the AC, the electric bill is $500. This is no joke, Olivia explained. Their old traditional style house had more than 8 rooms, so it was no surprise that utility costs were high. But even so, a $500 electricity bill seemed a little steep. It was a particularly hot summer, so they probably overused the AC. I thought you would have known that from the start. How would we have known? Mom used to pay the bills. Jackson scratched his head frantically as Olivia fumed. There's no way we would have known. Do you know the property tax for that house is $5,000 a year? Olivia exclaimed. What? I can't believe you didn't know. Why would an old house like that cost so much? How are we supposed to pay that? Jackson protested. Our house is old and has a large yard, so it's only natural that it would cost a lot to maintain, I pointed out. I also mentioned a reality to the Jacksons that they might not have realized. And you know, apparently it costs more in taxes to give away property while you're alive than after you pass away, I added. Wait, is that true? Jackson asked, stunned. I didn't know before, but now I know. My mom told me all this, I said, watching as the Jacksons looked really surprised. Olivia got mad and blamed them, saying, it's your fault for not doing your homework. Then they started arguing right in front of me. Jackson said, we worked hard to get Dad to change the name on the house. And now this is too much. I can't believe Dad did something sneaky like this. He even said it would be better to give it to me than to Mom. That's not fair. I realized, feeling shocked by my dad's actions. Taking advantage of the situation, Jackson said something surprising. You can have the house. Let's trade it for this Highlands condominium. Confused, I responded. What are you saying? The house isn't mine. It belongs to Mom. Please talk to Mom for me, I beg you. I'll just pass on your message, nothing more. What on earth are you even talking about? Jackson snapped, feeling foolish for even talking to them. I gave up on shopping and started walking back into the Highlands condominium through the entrance. But the Jacksons tried to follow me, which surprised me. I'll sue you for trespassing, I warned them. You just said that wouldn't be a legal problem, Olivia shot back. It seems like they won't understand until they face a real consequence, I sighed in frustration. I called out to the management office next to the entrance. Excuse me, could you please call security? Someone who doesn't live here is trying to get in. Wait a moment, the security guard, who was always on duty at the Highlands condominium, rushed over immediately. With the big security guard standing in front of them, the Jacksons looked startled. Once again, I warned them to avoid a repeat of the situation in the future. I didn't call the police just now because you only grabbed my arm. But if you try to use force or come back to the Highlands condominium, I will really call the police, understand? Don't make us do that. If I see you again, I'll report it, so go back to your mansion from Dad. Got it? I told them firmly. Looking scared of the police, the Jacksons quickly backed off. I returned to my apartment and told my mom about what happened with the Jacksons. But why did Dad let Jackson inherit the house? I asked, feeling sad. My mom smiled. Dad must have had a reason when he let Jackson inherit the house. He didn't want to trouble me or you, Lily. Even though Dad wasn't very interested in money, he cared a lot about me. Remember, he always said he loved you, Lily, so much, she added. Really? I was so happy to hear that my dad cared about me so much. When my mom heard about the house from Jackson, she muttered, "Is he going this far?" Because she realized he had given Jackson a serious punishment, even though Jackson was always selfish. You knew how Dad felt, Mom? I asked, surprised. Of course, dear. We've been together for 38 years. I know what he's thinking without him saying a word. Besides, Jackson never took care of Dad when he was sick, my mom explained. I misunderstood Dad. I feel terrible. I want to apologize, I admitted. Don't worry, Lily. Your feelings are reaching Dad in heaven. The ones who should worry are the Jacksons, who these days would buy a big, high-maintenance house like that. I bet they'll struggle to find a buyer, my mom said with a smirk. After a while, it became clear that my mom was right. The Jacksons couldn't handle the house on their own and put it up for sale, but couldn't find anyone to buy it. They kept living there even a year later. Amidst all this, Olivia accidentally started a grease fire while cooking chicken in the house. It quickly burned down, and since they didn't have money for fire insurance, their life was going to get even tougher. Well, while I understand their problem, it's not my concern, I thought, feeling thankful for my life in the Highlands condominium. Living in the Highlands condominium was amazing, and I could only feel grateful to my mom. I've been paying her rent every month, but it seems she's been saving it to make sure we won't struggle in the future. Every day is peaceful and happy as I live with my wonderful mother and caring husband. Visiting my father's grave, I promised him that I would always repay my mother's kindness. My name is Mia Yates. I'm 23 years old, and I work from home. I have a nice older brother who is 5 years older than me. He's engaged to a woman named Natalie, who is 26 years old. Natalie is very different from me. I'm not great at talking to people, but Natalie is outgoing and makes friends easily. Natalie has become close to our parents and often visits our house without telling us beforehand. Today, she showed up at our door without calling first. When the doorbell rang, my mom knew it was Natalie and welcomed her in. Natalie came into the living room with my mom and said, "I'm here." Then she looked surprised when she saw me. "Mia, you're still home?" she said without even saying hello. I told her, "I'm working from home." But she just said, "That's enough. You need to get a real job." I didn't know how to respond, so I went back to work without saying anything. My room is special to me. It's soundproof, and I designed it myself. With my parents' permission, of course. I pay for everything. It's like my own private castle, so I keep it locked and don't let anyone else inside. To get in, you have to unlock the soundproof door and then open another door. When I got inside, I let out my frustrations by yelling. I was annoyed that Natalie didn't understand that I was working. At lunchtime, a little light bulb in my room blinked, letting me know it was time to eat. I went to the living room where lunch was ready. My mom suggested we eat together, so I sat down. But then I saw Natalie sitting across from me, looking upset. "You're eating even though you don't have a job. Don't you care about upsetting your parents? You're like a parasite," Natalie said. I stayed quiet and just listened. When my parents said grace, I did too, and then started eating. Natalie didn't seem happy that my parents didn't scold me for not having a job. "Natalie, don't worry about it. Mia's our daughter, and we'll take care of her," my dad said, trying to reassure her. But Natalie wasn't convinced. She kept on expressing her worries. "I can't feel sure about marrying into this family if things stay like this," she said, still angry. My parents tried to calm her down, saying, "Just marry into our family, everything will be fine." But Natalie wasn't happy with their response. She kept on talking about her concerns. "I'm still not reassured. What if you two can't take care of Mia anymore? Do you expect me or our future kids to look after her?" she said, assuming that I'd always depend on others and never do anything for myself. I stopped eating and felt upset by what she was saying. My mom tried to defend me, saying, "Mia does work, you know. Don't worry about her," but Natalie wouldn't stop worrying. At 23, just look at her. Braided hair, thick glasses, always in sweats. Who would believe she's working like this? Natalie said, clearly frustrated. I tried to defend myself, softly saying, how I look doesn't affect my work. But it seemed to make her even more upset. Then what kind of job do you do? Tell me, she demanded, staring at me angrily. I was so scared that I couldn't speak. My mom stepped in, saying, Mia's job is private to our family. I'm sorry, but we can't discuss it. Natalie got up and stormed off, saying, so I'm not part of this family, is that it? I felt bad for causing a scene and apologized to my parents. My dad reassured me, saying, it's okay, Mia. Just do what makes you happy, with a smile. After dinner, I felt a bit better and decided to talk to Natalie about my job after my brother's wedding. I brought it up during the meal, and my parents seemed to think it was a good idea. Later in the evening, after cleaning up, I went grocery shopping with my mom while my dad took care of the garden. When we got back, we found Natalie crying in the living room with my dad comforting her. My mom asked what was wrong, but Natalie was too upset to answer. My dad told us he heard a loud noise from inside the house while he was in the garden. He pointed to a crowbar and hammer on the table. I realized right away that something had happened to my room and rushed to check it out. When I got to my room, I saw that the door was badly damaged, like someone had tried to force it open with a crowbar and hammer. I felt frozen, a mix of shock and fear taking over me. My dad called my brother, who promised to come over as soon as he could. So I decided to stay in my room until he got there and tried to calm myself down. While I was waiting, I called my company and got permission to tell my future sister-in-law about my job after she married my brother. When I saw the light flicker in my room, I knew my brother had arrived. When I stepped out, I was surprised to see him already at the door. He apologized for startling me and didn't look at me but at the damaged door. I could tell he was probably shocked by what Natalie had done. I told him not to worry, that I would replace it myself, but he insisted that Natalie would take care of it. He took my hand and led me to the living room, where Natalie and my parents were waiting. As soon as we walked in, my brother confronted Natalie, saying, I never thought you were capable of such violence. Everyone was shocked to see my usually calm brother so angry. He insisted, you need to apologize properly to Mia and fix the door. Natalie started crying and kept saying, I'm sorry, to my brother. But he interrupted her, saying, this apology isn't for me, and gave her a stern look. I told my brother it was okay, but he kept his eyes on Natalie. She turned to me, knelt down, and apologized, promising to make things right. I accepted her apology and decided to move on from the incident. But I was curious why she did it, so I asked her. She said, I thought if you didn't have a safe place, you'd have to get a job. Hearing this, I debated whether to tell her about my job before the wedding. But I knew it went against company rules, so I stayed quiet for now. The tension between my brother and Natalie bothered me, so I gave them each a concert ticket to try to lighten the mood. As Natalie looked at the tickets, she exclaimed, these are for the Ames concert. Her face lit up with excitement, and she turned to my brother, saying, let's go. Her joy was infectious. My brother asked me, are you sure? These tickets are hard to get. I replied, I got lucky. You can use them to make peace if you want. My brother's face also lit up with delight. Seeing them so happy made me happy too. The good vibes returned and everyone forgot about the damaged door, enjoying their meal together. On the day of the concert, while I was out, Natalie excitedly visited my house to thank me. Since I wasn't home at the time, Natalie seemed to tell my parents, enjoy yourselves. Looks like Mia's decided to work outside for a change. The concert was fantastic. Afterward, my brother called me. He'd split off from Natalie at a company party and was thrilled about the concert. He mentioned that Natalie was a huge Ames fan and had always wanted to attend their once-a-year concert. He said she was over the moon about finally seeing them live. On the way home, Natalie couldn't stop talking about how amazing Ames was. When I mentioned I was glad we patched things up, my brother surprised me by saying, the soundproof door we got as compensation cost $7,000. I just replied, sounds about right. He was shocked, saying, wow, that's expensive. I explained to my brother that the components for a soundproof room are expensive, which surprised him even more. He mentioned that Natalie felt the $7,000 expense for the door, but the concert made up for it. I felt good about giving them the tickets, especially since my brother and Natalie seemed to be getting along. However, Natalie still didn't understand my work-from-home job, and thought I started working outside after the concert, which made her happy. When she realized her mistake, she started calling and visiting my house daily, urging me to get a job. I hoped to endure it until the wedding. But things only got worse. Even though I didn't want to see her until then, Natalie kept summoning me to the living room, where she kept nagging me about getting a job before the wedding, saying, "I don't want a jobless family member." To distract Natalie, I gave her merchandise like mascots and file cases from my previous company. At first, she happily accepted her favorite Ames items, but eventually, she started asking questions. She wondered why I had so much Ames merchandise. Reluctantly, I told her, "A friend who works with the Ames company gives them to me." When Natalie heard this, her smile widened and she seemed even happier. "Please get me more tickets next time," she said, but there was still a problem. She wanted more merchandise and started causing trouble about being allowed into my room. I managed to stop her a few times, but I worried she might break the door again. So I gathered my courage and gave her a stern warning. "Natalie, if you break the door again, it won't just be the cost of repairs this time. Last time, I paid for it. Next time, you'll be the one paying." Natalie's face went pale at my words. I wondered if she was really considering doing it again. All I could do was hope the wedding would be over soon so I could have some peace. Even after that, until the wedding day, there wasn't a single day when Natalie didn't visit or use the call light. I lost count of how many times I yelled enough already in my room. I tried talking to my brother about it, but he seemed resigned, saying, "I've told Natalie over 100 times that Mia is working, but she doesn't seem to listen to me." In my mind, I thought, I wish my brother would get as angry as he did when she broke my door. But I knew he was busy with wedding preparations. He had mentioned he needed to finish a ton of work before the wedding so he could go on the honeymoon. So I didn't have much hope in relying on him. I had to give up and deal with Natalie on my own. Finally, it was the day before the wedding. As expected, our parents spent the day together, so the four of us had a fun night reminiscing and looking at old photo albums. It was nice to spend time together as a family after a long time. I mentioned, "When I get married, my brother will have his own family, so we'll just be the three of us with our parents the day before the wedding. It'll feel a bit lonely." But my brother reassured me, saying, "No, I'll come here and spend the day with you." I was glad he said that. In that peaceful moment, his phone rang. It was Natalie calling. He answered and then handed me the phone, saying, "Natalie wants to talk to you." When I answered the phone, Natalie said, "Hey, something's going on with Ames. There's a big announcement tomorrow. Can you ask your friend who gives you the merchandise what it's about? What if she's quitting or taking a break?" Apparently, Ames agency had announced on social media that there would be a major announcement the next day. I didn't want to be bothered during my family time, so I simply said, "I don't know," and hung up. My brother felt the same way and turned off his phone. When our dad said it was time to go to bed early, my brother bowed deeply and thanked our parents for taking care of him. He said he was ready to be happy with Natalie. Mom joked, "That's what happens when women get married." My brother laughed along with the rest of us, and we ended the night before the wedding on a light note. Finally, the wedding day arrived. I told my family I'd be a bit late in the morning, and they headed to the venue without me. When I got there later, I went to the waiting room to congratulate Natalie. I knocked on the door, and there she was, the beautiful bride, all ready for her big day. Just when I was going to congratulate the bride, she suddenly changed into a scary monster. She said she still had something important to tell me from yesterday when we talked on the phone. I said sorry and asked her what was wrong. She told me to leave. I tried to explain that it was my brother's wedding, but she was mad because I didn't have a job, and she didn't want people to think I was part of the family. I wanted to argue, but then Natalie, the bride, came really close to me and said firmly, "If I tell you to leave, you leave." Then she slammed the door shut. I felt really sad and went to a room they set up for me. There, professionals did my makeup and hair, and I changed into the nice dress I bought for the wedding. But I knew I wouldn't be able to go. While I was getting ready, my parents called. I told them what happened and promised I would still celebrate in my own way, even though I couldn't go to the ceremony. The wedding started without me, but I watched it on a screen in the room. I almost cried when I saw my brother looking for me, but I reminded myself it was a happy day, not a sad one, and watched the ceremony, sending my blessings silently. After all the fun, the lady hosting the event said, "We got a special video for the stars of today's show. Watch the screen, please." The lights dimmed and a video started playing. Everyone in the room cheered when they saw Ames, who Natalie adored, appear on the screen with a message. Surprise, it's me, Ames. Congratulations on getting married, bro, and Natalie. Natalie looked shocked and glanced at my brother, who seemed to be saying, "That's Mia. I've been looking forward to this day, but I couldn't make it because of some urgent stuff." I made up an excuse for not being there and shared a simple message of congratulations. Then, I admitted, "Natalie, I never told you, but I'm now part of your family. But I'm moving overseas soon, so we probably won't see each other much. You can ignore me if you want." Oh, and I wasn't just lazing around. I was working in my home studio. I couldn't help but add a little sarcasm. But I ended by saying, "I really wish you both all the happiness. I'm a singer-songwriter named Ames, and I got popular on social media. My stage name, Ames, is just my real name, Maya, spelled backward." When the lights turned on again, everyone was staring at Natalie. She looked shocked and really surprised. My part was done, so I left the place with the hair and makeup people and other workers. Later, my brother called me. He said after we left, Natalie was supposed to thank the guests and say goodbye, but instead, she was running around looking for me. When she found out I had left, she started crying in front of everyone. I also heard from friends that now everyone knows Natalie as the bride who Ames doesn't even consider family. My speech from the wedding got super famous on social media. They say she's feeling really sorry about what she did and can't even go out in her neighborhood anymore. After my father suddenly passed away from an unexpected illness, leaving behind a staggering $2 million debt, my mother and brother Tom took matters into their own hands. They decided how to handle my father's inheritance without consulting me, leaving me to bear the brunt of the debt. My frustration with them reached a boiling point, but the thought of their future struggles made me smirk inwardly. I'm Nancy, a 24-year-old single woman working as a nursery teacher at a daycare. I graduated from a junior college and have always lived at home with my father, mother, and my brother Tom, who is close to my age. Since childhood, Tom and I haven't gotten along. A graduate of a prestigious university, Tom looked down on me for my junior college education. His arrogance was matched by his frequent mockery of my modest personality and average looks. "With your plain appearance and lack of impressive credentials, who would ever want to date you?" he would sneer. In reality, I do have a boyfriend, but I keep this a secret to avoid provoking Tom's scorn. Though Tom's sarcasm used to sting, those days are long behind me. I now take great pride in my work as a nursery teacher, finding immense joy in interacting with children and watching them grow. Tom's words no longer faze me. My mother, who reveres Tom for his prestigious university degree, constantly boasts about him to relatives and neighbors. In stark contrast, I was often treated as an afterthought. It was clear that my mother favored Tom and showered him with preferential treatment. Unlike her, my father always had my back. Whenever my mother gave snacks exclusively to Tom, my father would secretly share the same treats with me. He would proudly express his admiration for my choice to become a nursery teacher, and I deeply cherished his supportive gestures and words. My father was the CEO of a small company where Tom also worked. Unfortunately, the company's financial situation had been deteriorating recently. Despite my father's relentless efforts to cut the deficit and his late nights at the office, Tom remained indifferent. "I can't work for a company run by someone who looks so evenly poor," Tom said, resigning from the company to take a position elsewhere. Since her marriage, my mother had stopped working and fully dedicated herself to managing the household. With no experience in supporting my father's business, she didn't grasp the challenges he faced. Despite witnessing his daily struggles, she criticized him for the company's lack of success. "The company is still struggling. If you don't resolve the deficit soon, I won't be able to buy that new bag from the magazine. Honestly, what are you doing every day? You're completely useless," my mother said. She had an insatiable appetite for spending, especially on luxury items, often making impulsive purchases. Her dismissive attitude toward my father, as if she couldn't see the value of his hard work, filled me with outrage. Though I'm no business expert, I've witnessed my father's tireless efforts from a young age and understand how challenging it is to manage a business. My mother, who has been with him for years, should recognize this as well. I couldn't fathom why she would blame him as though he were incompetent. One day, my frustration boiled over, and I confronted my mother, demanding she stop belittling my father. Her response was dismissive and condescending. "Why should I be scolded by someone like you? People without an education should keep their opinions to themselves. Don't speak on things you don't understand," she retorted. Tom, seemingly influenced by my mother's attitude, joined in and criticized me harshly. It was clear that despite sharing the same blood, our values and personalities were worlds apart. "Nancy, don't let their words affect you. Education doesn't define your worth. Take pride in your role as a nursery teacher. That's what truly matters," my father said. His words of encouragement warmed my heart and bolstered my resolve. Even though part of me wanted to stand up to Tom and felt overshadowed by him, my father's support made me feel fearless. As long as he was by my side, I knew I could face anything. An unexpected event shattered my world. "Father," I was horrified to learn that my father had collapsed at work. The company staff who reached out to me said he was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Without hesitation, I dashed to the hospital, only to find that my mother and brother were nowhere to be seen. "I'm too busy to leave. You'll have to handle Dad's care," my mother said. I was stunned by her response. How could she claim to be too busy when my father's life was at stake? As a jobless person, surely she had more flexibility than I did. What could possibly be more important than being there for my father? In disbelief, I took care of the hospital formalities and listened to the doctor's grim news. My father had acute heart failure and only had a few days left. I visited him as often as I could, hoping to see his smile once more. A few days after his collapse, as if sensing my presence, he briefly regained consciousness while I held his hand. "Dad, I'm so relieved to see you. Do you recognize me? Can you hear my voice?" I pleaded desperately, but he looked at me with a distant, vacant stare before quietly closing his eyes, never to open them again. Until my father passed away, neither my mother nor Tom made any effort to visit him. They only appeared just before the funeral, clearly reluctant to oversee the arrangements. During our conversation there, it became apparent that my father's company had gone bankrupt, leaving behind a $2 million debt. "Inheritances come with debts," my mother said, her tone dripping with disdain. As the funeral proceeded, both she and Tom began to blame my father for the situation. He was unreliable in life, and now he's left us with this burden. "What a curse," they complained. "What are we supposed to do about all this debt?" my mother wondered aloud. "I have a suggestion," Tom said with a smirk, turning his gaze toward me. "Since Dad had such a soft spot for you, why don't you inherit everything? You can also take on the debt. It's only fair to repay the love you received from him," my mother added, her voice carrying a sense of cold expectation. Unbelievably, my mother and Tom were trying to offload both my father's inheritance and his debts onto me. Despite my father's passing, they were more concerned with their own interests than with mourning his loss. They had always belittled and ridiculed both my father and me, seeing us merely as tools for their gain. However, I had a plan in reserve, something my father had asked me to use if anything happened to him. It was time to put it into action. I decided to keep my true intentions hidden and reluctantly agreed to their demands, all while secretly preparing to execute my plan. "Understood. I will take on the entire estate, including the debt." My easy acquiescence surprised both my mother and Tom, considering I was assuming a $2 million debt. They probably anticipated more resistance from me, but their satisfaction in offloading the burden onto me seemed to eclipse any surprise. They looked at me with a mix of triumph and condescension. "So, you're actually going to pay off all the debt? We appreciate that. It's lucky for us, even if I don't quite understand your thinking. You really are quite naive, though. I suppose that's to be expected given your limited education," Tom said. My mother and Tom ultimately relinquished their claims to my father's estate. With no other relatives to contest the inheritance, I was the sole beneficiary. After my father's death, I moved out of the home I no longer wished to live in and began a new chapter on my own. It was then that I discreetly set my plan into motion. Several months after my father's passing, one day, "What on earth is this?" Tom, who I hadn't seen in a while, appeared visibly enraged, his face reddening as if he was on the verge of lashing out. His fury was likely triggered by seeing me emerge from a mansion that could only be described as extravagant. Why is Nancy, who supposedly inherited $2 million in debt and has such a low social status, living in a house like this? It was clear that this was the question Tom and my mother would be asking. Seeing your astonished faces is quite the reunion after so long. I'm glad to see you're doing well, I responded. Who do you think you are? Making jokes with no education. I want to know what's going on, Tom snapped. This is where I live. Is it really so surprising to see me coming out of my own home? Tom, growing increasingly agitated, advanced toward me. However, as a nursery teacher accustomed to lifting children daily, I had developed more strength than the average woman. Tom, who led a sedentary lifestyle and avoided exercise, was comparatively weak. I swiftly overpowered him and had him on the ground in no time. He looked utterly bewildered. As Tom lay on the ground and my mother rushed to his side, I smiled and began to explain. The reason I'm living here is because of the decision you both made to relinquish Dad's inheritance. Before he passed away, my father had been quietly building wealth through real estate to secure our future. Despite the company's debt, the market value of the properties increased significantly after I inherited the estate. I sold them at the right time, and even after accounting for inheritance taxes, the profit from the real estate exceeded $5 million. My father had anticipated this rise in value, which is why I took on the inheritance, despite the debt. Instead of using the proceeds to pay off the $2 million debt immediately, I first ensured that the employees of my father's company were fairly compensated. Additionally, I received a life insurance payout of $3 million. The amount was truly staggering. Wait a minute, life insurance is usually paid out to the spouse, right? My mother interjected. It appears Dad changed the beneficiary to me, I explained. He had informed me of this while he was still alive. My father was deeply troubled by your harsh words and excessive spending. To ensure that his life insurance money was used wisely, he trusted me to manage it and change the beneficiary. I have a dream that I've kept to myself, one to support and nurture children facing economic hardships. With the funds from my father's estate and the life insurance payout, I built a large house that could easily be called a mansion. While continuing my work as a nursery teacher, I am also applying the real estate investment skills I learned from my father to steadily grow my assets. After explaining everything, my mother and Tom were enraged, their voices rising in anger. This is absurd. Why didn't you tell us something so crucial? If we had known about the real estate, we never would have let you inherit it. I responded firmly. Dad anticipated that you would react exactly like this if he knew. That's why he kept it a secret, to prevent you from claiming everything. I didn't expect you to respond just as he predicted, but it seems he was right. What are you talking about? Regardless, we deserve our share of the inheritance. We have a right to it. I was taken aback by my mother's audacious demand for a portion of the assets. It was clear that when it came to money, people reveal their true nature. My mother and Tom were showing their cowardice and arrogance, just as I had always known them to be. You both forfeited that right when you renounced the inheritance. It's not possible to reclaim it now. I cannot hand over the hard-earned assets my father accumulated to people who are consumed by their own greed. The ignorant, uneducated one just won't stop whining. Quit your nagging and hand it over now, Tom shouted. Despite their continued baseless complaints, I had no choice but to call security to have them removed. They left quietly after being escorted out. In the following days, security footage showed them loitering near my house, trying to find a way to claim my father's inheritance. Their persistence was unsettling. Using the footage, I reported them to the police as suspicious individuals. After that, I no longer saw my mother or Tom around my home. After some time had passed, I learned about my mother and Tom's situation from a family friend who had been close to us for years. Tom had found a new job, but his self-centered attitude quickly earned him a poor reputation. Within less than a year, he had alienated his boss and was relegated to menial desk work, a far cry from the special treatment he had enjoyed as the president's son at my father's company. Eventually, the harsh work environment took its toll, and he left the job. His tarnished reputation made it challenging for him to find new employment within the industry. "Why aren't you working? Stop lazing around," my mother would admonish. "It's not like I'm just sitting around doing nothing," Tom would retort. "What kind of effort are you putting in, you useless, unemployed person?" my mother would criticize. After witnessing Tom's failure, Her attitude toward him changed drastically. Once doting on him, she now blamed him for his incompetence and joblessness, growing increasingly cold and distant. The shift in my mother's behavior placed immense psychological pressure on Tom, eventually leading him to become a recluse. Having relied on my father's income for years and never having developed the skills or inclination to work, my mother now faces financial struggles alongside Tom. Both are struggling to make ends meet. As for me, I am happily married to the man I have been dating, and we now live in the large house I own. My husband shares my passion for helping children in economic need. Together, we are working towards this dream by setting up the necessary facilities and obtaining the required qualifications. I hold deep gratitude for my irreplaceable father, and with my husband by my side, I am living a fulfilling and purposeful life.
Why are you ignoring me? I've decided not to engage with strangers. I understand. I'll continue living with my in-laws. They completely ignore me. I expected it from my mother-in-law, but I never imagined my father-in-law would treat me this way. There was a reason why the once kind in-laws had changed. It was because of my sister-in-law, who disliked me. With her return, our peaceful life together was completely upended. Don't regret it, okay? You think I'm going to regret this? Think again, jerk. I packed my bags and left my in-laws' house. Sure enough, just 3 days after I left, chaos broke out in their household. I met my husband at my workplace. He was in sales and frequently visited my office. I was his main contact. As we spent more time in meetings and discussions, I grew fond of him. He was a caring and kind man, tall and not necessarily handsome in the conventional sense, but he exuded a charismatic vibe. He was popular, but for some reason, he said he liked me, and we began dating. When we talked, he mentioned growing up in a typical family with parents and a sister. I lost my parents in an accident when I was young and grew up in an orphanage. It was a complex issue for me, but when we started dating, I quickly shared my background with him. He responded, "That must have been tough, but don't worry. I'll always be there for you." Soon after, he proposed. From the beginning, my husband intended our relationship to head towards marriage and quickly introduced me to his parents. During the introduction, I told them about growing up in the orphanage. They listened attentively and reassured me that it wouldn't matter in our marriage. It made me very happy. Besides, they told me that being raised in an orphanage had nothing to do with being their daughter-in-law, which truly made me happy. Only my sister-in-law, being very attached to her brother, seemed taken aback, asking, "You grew up in an orphanage?" My husband had to reprimand her. In retrospect, she probably disliked me from our first meeting. I didn't give it much thought at that time, thinking we had just met. Before our marriage, my husband and I discussed moving in with his parents. We seriously considered it, but in the end, I decided not to quit my job. It turns out my husband was set to be transferred soon. I thought about quitting my job to move with him, but my career was going well, and I had just been given direct reports. We discussed it and decided he would move on his own after getting married. I wanted to savor that newly feeling for a bit. I even casually thought about visiting my husband during the long weekends for a little vacation feel. The idea of moving in with the in-laws so soon after marriage was a bit daunting, but my husband probably felt more at ease living with his parents. Plus, to put his ever-worried mother at ease, he probably wanted us to live together. Having lost my parents at a young age, I had always yearned for a family, so living with them wasn't an entirely unappealing idea. Plus, my in-laws had always treated me kindly, and I had grown fond of them. Balancing work and my duties as a daughter-in-law was challenging, but having a family made me happy and fulfilled. One day, my father-in-law approached me with an unexpected request. This would mark the beginning of the unraveling of our seemingly happy cohabitation. It was a time when my overly anxious mother-in-law, who tended to act domineering towards my father-in-law, was out shopping. I was about to start cleaning on my day off when my father-in-law asked to speak with me. What's the matter? Well, I don't want my wife to know, but I'm taking a leave from work. A leave. He explained that he had been having problems with his boss and coworkers, and his health had deteriorated to the point where he had no choice but to take a leave. My mother-in-law is a good person, but she's always anxious and a bit neurotic, living with them. I began to notice her neurotic tendencies and how my father-in-law tiptoed around her to avoid upsetting her. He had always been on the slimmer side, but now that I think about it, he did seem to have lost some weight recently. It would be nice if my mother-in-law was the type to genuinely worry about my father-in-law's weight loss. However, when he had previously taken a sick day due to a cold, she remarked, "A cold. All of your colleagues are at executive levels by now. It's because you're always taking days off claiming bad health or colds. That's why you don't get promoted." Rather than showing concern, she was the kind to give him a hard kick in the pants. He probably tried his best to push through, no matter how poor his health was. However, his condition worsened, and he secretly took multiple sick days to visit the hospital. He was both mentally and physically at his limit. With his frequent early departures, tardiness, and absences, there was talk of him possibly taking a temporary leave from work. But my father-in-law didn't want to upset my mother-in-law under any circumstances. If he were to suggest taking a leave of absence, it's obvious that she would explode in anger. Besides, my father-in-law's salary wasn't that great, and he depended on his overtime pay, so taking a leave would mean he'd be making significantly less. If he told my husband, he'd probably end up telling my mother-in-law. So he approached me, asking if I could help with the living expenses. If I suggest taking a leave, she might even divorce me, he said. Hearing those words from him felt like a punch to the gut. I deeply appreciated my in-laws, who had warmly welcomed me without discriminating against my background of being raised in an institution. Determined to be supportive, I made up my mind to help him out during this tough time. Understood. I'll transfer money into your account every month. Please use it for living expenses. I'm truly sorry. I'll do my best to recover quickly and return to work. Thank you so much, he said. After that, my father-in-law pretended to go to work as usual, while I transferred money into his bank account, which he used for living expenses. My mother-in-law, being rather carefree, didn't meticulously check her bank statements or maintain a household ledger, so she never noticed my transfers. Pretending to go to work, he would visit a mental clinic or take walks in the serene mountains. Gradually, his complexion seemed to improve. I thought he might be returning to work soon, but then an unexpected event occurred. After a marital spat, my sister-in-law returned to her parental home. There's nothing like being home. I thought I'd go crazy if I had to stay with that idiot husband of mine. I'll be staying here for a while. Please prepare meals for me too. I was well aware from our first meeting that my sister-in-law didn't like me. During our family's first meeting, my husband was really upset because she was visibly displeased. During the wedding, she maintained a sour expression throughout and even told me point blank, "My brother looks so good, but you? It would have been better if he married someone prettier." She openly looked down on me, raised in an institution, saying it was embarrassing that I didn't have parents to present at the wedding. However, she got married earlier than us and had already moved out, so I thought our interactions would be limited. That's why I thought living with them would be okay. If she had been living at home, I wouldn't have even considered moving in, knowing the daily jibes I would receive. Still, I thought this visit was just temporary due to her marital problems and expected her to leave within a few days. Despite her stern behavior towards my father-in-law, my mother-in-law was never harsh towards me. Even if my sister-in-law had made snide comments, I believed my mother-in-law would have defended me. But I was wrong. One day when I returned from work, something seemed off about my mother-in-law's behavior. Is something wrong? She seemed distant, not engaging in her usual conversation. When I asked, she responded, "Did you know you've been bad-mouthing me behind my back?" "What? I've never said anything bad about you. You've always been kind to me, and I'm truly grateful. Why would I badmouth you? You've been playing the good daughter-in-law card all this time, but you've been bad-mouthing me on the side. Fine, whatever. Saying this, she left the room. In the hallway, my sister-in-law was smirking. Looks like you've fallen out of favor. Did your true colors show? Being raised in an institution, your background really does show, huh? It's better not to badmouth people, you know. I haven't said anything bad about her. Oh, the neighbors seem to have heard it. After I returned home after such a long time, they told me that you've been constantly criticizing her. What? Who are these neighbors? Look, it's been a while since I got married and moved out, so I've kind of forgotten the names of the neighbors. I've never said any of those things. Stop making things up. Oh my, how rude, Mom. She's calling me a liar and bullying me. Saying this, she entered my mother-in-law's room. After that, my sister-in-law's malicious behavior escalated. She claimed I told her to sleep in the corridor and take the last bath because she's just a lodger. She complained to my mother-in-law about every little thing. Every time, I had to explain that I hadn't said or done any such thing. However, my mother-in-law seemed to be completely taken in by my sister-in-law's words and seemed to be under her influence. My sister-in-law continued her day, making me wonder if she intended to stay indefinitely. With these worries, I headed home with a heavy heart. I'm home. Previously, my mother-in-law would cheerfully greet me with welcome back. Now, there was silence. I'll get dinner ready, I said, stepping into the living room. I was shocked. Normally, my sister-in-law would nag me to prepare dinner quickly, but now my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and sister-in-law were all eating sushi together. Surprised? My sister-in-law said, "Oh, it looks like someone who isn't family is home. You're not thinking of having sushi, are you?" Without even glancing at me, my mother-in-law continued eating while watching TV. If you wanted sushi, you should have said so. I rushed home after shopping. No one asked for that. Hey, Mom, Dad, I went out with my friends during the day and got some delicious pudding. Let's eat together. As my sister-in-law said that without paying any mind to me, the three of them started eating the pudding. I was exhausted from work and didn't have the energy to get upset, so I went to my room without eating. The next day, my sister-in-law said she was going out with friends and asked me to drive her to the station. I obviously declined since it was a weekday and I had work. Even if we were headed in the same direction, it would be a completely different route, and she wanted to leave close to noon. There's no way I could take her. Just take a day off. It's fine. Your cute little sis-in-law just wants a ride. She never had the chance to relax and hang out after she got married, right? Can't you be a bit kinder to her? Now, with all due respect, didn't you go out with friends last night after getting a late-night call? Seems like you've been going out almost every day since you came home. I have work. Please take the bus or train. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were murmuring in the background, but I was fed up. I left for work. However, that night, the defining event that made me decide to leave this house took place. I got held up at work and returned home after picking up some groceries, expecting to be berated. It had started raining by the time I left the office, and it was pouring so hard that even getting in and out of the car, I was drenched. I wondered what nasty trick would be played on me tonight. But when I got home, the three of them were eating takeout just like the day before, no greeting, acting as if they didn't even notice my return. But I've grown used to this treatment. I glanced toward the courtyard from the hallway and saw something placed in the center of the garden. Taking a closer look, it was my belongings. A designer bag I bought with my first paycheck, shoes that were my first birthday gift from my husband, and even my computer that I used for work at home was soaked. As I was in shock, my sister-in-law said with a smirk, "I felt so grossed out having a stranger's things in the house. I threw them out, flaunting a designer bag like that. How arrogant of you." Neither of my in-laws said a word about her outrageous behavior. Why didn't you stop her? Have I done something to you? Do you really believe her lies that I've been bad-mouthing you, bullying her? Aren't you mad at her for what she did? My mother-in-law avoided my gaze, staying silent. Why won't you say anything? I can't talk to strangers. I can't be friendly with someone who's not family. My mother-in-law wouldn't even look at me. My sister-in-law grinned, waiting for my rebuttal. Wait, where's my father-in-law? I'm the one supporting him during his time off. I'm the one helping out with the finances in this house. Sure, I did it out of gratitude, but shouldn't he defend me now? Surely, he'd be on my side. Hoping for support, I looked at him, but he walked past me without a word and went into his room. That was the breaking point for me. I see, I've had enough. Oh, aren't you mad? I'm sorry. To be honest, I never liked you from the beginning, you know? Being raised in an institution and all. Just don't regret this, like I would, loser. I packed my things and prepared to leave immediately. Seeing me in this state, only my father-in-law seemed flustered since he was the one depending on me financially. Still, he didn't try to stop me or defend me. I was completely done with his apathy. My husband's work assignment was quite far away, but I wanted to leave this house as soon as possible. I quickly got in my car and drove to him. I never once confided in my husband about all this. I doubt my mother-in-law told him about my sister-in-law coming back home. If he had known, he would have contacted me, knowing I don't get along with her. But my husband never mentioned anything about my sister-in-law in his calls or messages. I never felt anything off about my husband's behavior, but perhaps he's being manipulated by her, fed lies about various things. Even now, as I head to him, he might treat me with the same cold attitude as them. My heart was exhausted, feeling so suspicious even towards my husband, whom I trust most. If he's of the same mind and attitude as them, maybe divorce is the only option. That's how deeply distressed I felt. When I arrived at his out-of-state apartment, he hadn't returned yet, perhaps busy since it was the end of the month. As I waited, my husband energetically entered the apartment, maybe having noticed the lights. What if you were coming? You should have told me. I would have come home earlier. What a surprise, no, just seeing your face. He immediately greeted me with a radiant smile. The relief of seeing him happy to see me combined with the humiliation from my in-laws' house made a mixture of emotions flood out. And I broke down crying. What happened? Did I say something wrong? Seriously, what's going on? It seemed my husband had no idea about the treatment I received at his parents' house. I composed myself, knowing I had to clearly explain everything to him, and began to recount everything. How I've been financially assisting his father who took medical leave, without telling his wife that his sister had returned and was now staying at their parents' home. That she'd been feeding his mother lies about me, turning her cold towards me, how they referred to me as an outsider, how they ignored me, left my belongings out in the rain and ruined them. Through tears and pauses, I told him everything. Finally, I made it clear that I had no intention of ever returning to that house, and that if he couldn't agree with me on this, I'd want a divorce. My husband apologized for being too engrossed in his work and not checking in on me more often, regretting his family's behavior towards me. Of course, he told me I don't have to go back to his parents' house or even speak to them. Even if I ever forgave them, he was adamant about cutting ties with his parents and sister. He also promised not to provide any financial aid to his father anymore. That night, I felt truly relieved. The tension I had been holding melted away, and I had a peaceful sleep by his side. After that, I never returned to my in-laws' house. While commuting from my husband's out-of-state place was not feasible, I had already approached my company about working remotely. Since my sister-in-law and mother-in-law started treating me harshly, my job doesn't necessarily require being in the office, and many of my colleagues and superiors also work remotely. While I had to visit the office a few times a month, several colleagues lived even further away, so switching to remote work wasn't a problem. I hadn't truly experienced married life since moving in with his family and dealing with my sister-in-law's bullying, but now we could finally live like newlyweds. Just as I was setting up my remote workstation, predictably, my sister-in-law contacted me. It turned out the day after I left their house was the day my father-in-law was supposed to get paid. My mother-in-law usually withdraws a certain amount and transfers it to their household account on payday. But this time she couldn't. Until now, I have been supplementing my father-in-law's reduced salary due to his time off. Upon checking their balance, my mother-in-law confronted him, and he confessed that I had been helping them financially. "Hey, why didn't you tell me you were covering the living expenses?" He told me not to, saying he didn't want you to know, so I kept it a secret. Anyway, we're running out of money for living expenses, and there's no one to cook or do laundry. The room is a mess. As his wife, you need to come back and take care of these things and transfer money quickly. How heartless. I told you, didn't I? I don't regret this. I have no intention of going back to that house or continuing as your maid. Why should I help people who hate me, destroy my belongings, and treat me like this? Aren't you his wife? Without your help, we can't pay the electricity or gas bills. We can't even go shopping. That's why I said it. I'm an outsider, so it's none of my business, right? I hung up, ignoring my sister-in-law's ranting. She and my mother-in-law kept pestering me with calls and messages, but I ignored all of them. Even after my husband returned from work, the persistent calls from them continued. When my husband answered, he told them firmly, "I'll never forgive you for how you treated her, and I'm never sending her back to you. I'm not coming back either. I don't consider you my family anymore. Stay away from my wife, or you'll regret it." Given that my sister-in-law adored her brother, and my mother-in-law heavily relied on him, they were probably in shock. A few days later, I received a call from my father-in-law. He said living with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law was becoming unbearable, and he begged me to continue the financial assistance. I'm still grateful for them accepting me, who grew up in an orphanage when they married. But they didn't support me in my time of need, despite all the financial help I've provided. I don't owe them anything. Why should I help those who joined others in ignoring me? I'll never assist you again. And with that, I ended the call. Later on, my relentless mother-in-law and sister-in-law audaciously showed up at my workplace. Since I was already working remotely and had a bad feeling about them, I'd informed my company about the situation. The security was alerted immediately. Apparently, they caused a scene, demanding that the company force me to send money back home. Upon hearing this, my husband said, "Report them to the police." Colleagues at my company were supportive, saying, "I can't believe you lived with those people. Focus on your remote work with your husband." As for my in-laws, my father-in-law's health deteriorated under the pressure from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and he'd eventually resigned. My sister-in-law tried to return to her husband's family, but he refused to take her back. The small town quickly caught wind of her drama at my workplace. Given the embarrassment, there was an uproar at her in-laws' place. The original reason for the fight between my sister-in-law and her husband was her affair. This incident added to their issues, leading to an immediate decision to divorce. Without a home, my in-laws and sister-in-law moved to a cheap apartment, managing to get by on part-time jobs. As for my husband and me, we're finally living peaceful days, feeling mentally and physically fulfilled. Recently, we found out we're expecting a child and are overjoyed. We're looking forward to the day we meet our baby, cherishing our time together. That worthless wife, just discard her before we land in real trouble. As soon as they assumed I was asleep, my husband and his mother underwent a complete shift in their attitudes. Initially leaving home under the pretext of safeguarding their assets, they shamelessly returned, unleashing chaos. When I confronted them with reality, my name is Daisy, 30 years old, engaged to Brad after a 5-year courtship, living with his parents, the true nature of my husband and his mother became evident, despite our initial agreement to purchase our own house after having our first child. Almost 2 years had passed, and we were still residing with his parents. In this extended stay with my husband, his mother, and his younger brother. Concerns about me surfaced among those around us. My parents lived at a considerable distance, requiring air travel, expressing regret that they couldn't provide assistance. Despite this, my relationship with my husband and mother-in-law remained strong, seemingly immune to the typical conflicts between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. I was content until one day, an accident left me hospitalized with a broken bone. Initially, my husband and mother-in-law visited daily, displaying genuine concern. However, their visits dwindled to once a week, and their attitude took a drastic turn. Overhearing a conversation they thought I was oblivious to, my husband and mother-in-law expressed disappointment in me. The accident had rendered me unable to perform household chores or contribute financially. In their eyes, I transformed from a wife to a burden, with the idea of having children becoming even more distant. Their conversation continued, dismissing the purpose of our marriage, claiming that I was meant to serve as a maid and caregiver. Frustrated by the inconvenience, they discussed the possibility of divorcing me. Unbeknownst to them, I heard it all while pretending to be asleep. From that point on, their demeanor towards me grew increasingly cold. My husband's visits became sporadic, and my mother-in-law's comments were laced with disdain. The only solace came from my brother-in-law, who continued to assist me with daily tasks and offered emotional support during my hospitalization. Although physical therapy was challenging, my brother-in-law's presence helped me persevere. Despite my progress, when I shared news of potential lingering issues with my husband and mother-in-law, they argued over my fate, blaming me for their troubles. In reality, I had been caring for my father-in-law for 5 years, a responsibility I undertook while dating my husband. Why don't you live together since you are both going to get married anyway? Yeah, it's a great idea. We can save money by living together and then get married when we're settled. When I hesitated, they reassured me, it's okay. We have plenty of rooms and we won't invade your privacy. Plus, you don't need to pay rent. You want to marry my son, right? How could I refuse? But in return, we have a favor to ask, Daisy. While you're working from home, can you look after our father, who needs care? It's only for 4 to 5 hours during the day when my mother is out for her part-time job. We also have my brother, so the two of you can work together. My brother-in-law was also working from home, so Yi and I teamed up to take care of my father-in-law in the house. My father-in-law and brother-in-law were very close. My father-in-law had a hobby of collecting furniture and even had a separate house just for it. My brother-in-law and I always enjoyed hearing about his hobby. My father-in-law loved his caring son, Regan. Eventually, my father-in-law's health began to decline, and after years of care, he passed away. After that, my husband proposed to me, saying, "Thank you for always taking care of my father. Let's continue to be together. Let's get married." Despite having worked hard on housework and caregiving, the moment I became immobile, my husband and mother-in-law's attitude towards me became as if I were worthless. Even I, normally composed, was infuriated. "Force me, please pay what you're supposed to." "Well, I don't want any trouble, so I'll give you the house. Let's waive the other division of property." I wondered if he would really give me the house, but since my father-in-law had left a substantial inheritance, it was divided among my mother-in-law, Brad, and Regan. The inheritance amounted to approximately $300,000 each, so he seemed to have enough assets. Regan was tasked with handling all paperwork with the executor and had to visit the court several times, which was quite a hassle. No way we can't give away the house. If we divide the property, I'll lose half my savings. It's just a wastefully large house in the countryside. Even if we give it away, it's not an issue. Even at the highest estimate, it's only worth about $100,000, plus various fees will be deducted when we sell it. It's cheaper than losing half my savings. Well, if you say so, Brad, but what if she demands more later? What if rumors spread in the neighborhood because we abandoned her? The two debated what to do with me. "Then I'll take her in," Regan, Brad's brother, interrupted. "Why would you go out of your way to do that? Ah, you've been interested in Daisy, haven't you? That's why you're so willing. You can have her if you want, but she's no longer of any use to us. Don't ask to take Daisy and the house back later, okay? Why would I? I just hope you won't come asking for money later. And remember, you can't return damaged goods. Brad and Reagan signed papers and arranged to formally change the property title through a lawyer. I'll take out some money for my savings, so why don't you find a younger, healthier, and prettier woman to marry and build a better house? Sounds good? Hey, Daisy, get a lawyer to file for our divorce quickly. They said they'd stay in a hotel for a while and left the room. Reagan and I silently saw them off. I had to find a lawyer to file for our divorce first. Reagan helped me to file for the divorce, and in a few days, Brad and I became complete strangers. A week later, Brad and my mother-in-law packed their belongings and left the house. It seemed peculiar that Reagan, Brad's brother, continued to visit me after I divorced his brother. When I expressed concern about him worrying about his former sister-in-law, he responded, "I'm doing this because I want to. I didn't get along with you just because you were my brother's wife. We both provided care and did housework together. We've talked a lot more in these 7 years than you ever did with my brother. We're friends, aren't we?" Reagan said with a gentle smile. All I could do was express my thanks and gratitude. A month later, I was discharged from the hospital. Although I had to continue visiting for physical therapy, being back home after such a prolonged absence was a relief. I couldn't help but wonder, do you think those two will really ever come back? I'm worried they might return and make me work again. If they come back, I'll drive them away. I can't forgive them for treating you so horribly. Plus, they have no right to return to this house, Reagan reassured. Despite still being unable to move as before, Reagan took care of most household chores. Fortunately, as a freelancer working from home, I was able to return to work and contribute financially. Thanks to bi-weekly physical therapy, my recovery proceeded smoothly without complications. A year later, I was able to resume a normal life, collaborating with Reagan on housework. We spent more time together, using our days off for trips. Just as I thought our peaceful days would continue, a storm suddenly hit. One night, while Reagan and I were having dinner, the door was knocked, and the intercom rang repeatedly. When I nervously answered, Brad appeared on the monitor. "Hey, open up. This isn't your home anymore. State your business and leave," I firmly said as I opened the door, surprised by Brad's unexpected arrival. "What do you want? Why do I have to put up with such an attitude just for coming home?" Brad said, entering without hesitation. "I'll be living here again from today. Oh, I'm hungry. Hey, Daisy, give me some food," he ordered, disregarding the changed dynamics. "Cut it out. Why are you here?" I asked, bewildered. Brad explained. "Well, I've spent almost all my money. My mom will be here soon too, so leave the door unlocked." Remaining silent, I heard him say, "Oh, you're all healed up, huh? That's great. Let's get back together. You must have had a hard time without me," as he persisted in his mistaken belief. He approached me with a disgusting familiarity, and the sheer audacity of his actions made me feel sick. "Stop it. I divorced you, and I don't care about you anymore. Don't get cocky. You've been living on my money all this time, and you can't do anything but housework. Just shut up and do as I say," Brad shouted at me. Just then, the door opened, and his mother arrived, criticizing the unlocked door as careless. "What's going on?" "She's been getting cheeky, so I was giving her a bit of education. She's grown thick-skinned in the year we've been away," Brad explained. Once again, Brad and his mother began to make themselves at home, acting as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I had had enough. "This isn't your home. I'm calling the police." "Oh yeah, about that. This house was originally in your father's name, right? So that means the heir, including my mother, makes our agreement null and void, doesn't it?" Brad shouted, making an unreasonable claim. "You promised to give me the house. If you're nullifying that, then everything about the division of property should be nullified as well. Give me half the savings." "Sure, but I don't have it anymore." "Didn't I tell you earlier? I've squandered it all. I quit my job, spent it all on booze, fun investments, you name it, Brad admitted, shocking me with the unbelievable revelation. I also have some debts with consumer finance, about $20,000. I guess you can pay for me, he continued. Initially, I thought he was lying, but his mother confirmed it. I can't lend you that much money. I'm not asking you to lend it. I'm telling you to pay it. I'm not giving you any money. I'm calling the police, I declared. As Reagan dialed the police to report the situation, Brad began wreaking havoc in the house, breaking the precious furniture that had been my father-in-law's keepsake. His mother joined in, destroying the furniture and laughing as she did so, something so terrible that it tarnished the memory of my father. About 10 minutes later, when the police arrived, I explained the situation to them. This is quite a mess. Let's hear your side of the story, one officer said. What's wrong with me breaking things in my own house? That's right. We're just crushing things we don't need. What's the problem? Brad argued, leaving the police unsure of how to respond. Reagan stepped in, clarifying that the house had never belonged to Brad and his mother. It was under my name. When the police seemed uncertain how to respond to this revelation, Reagan explained that our father-in-law had left a will, and the house was mine from the beginning. Brad and his mother stood dumbfounded. So this isn't your property then? The police asked. Hold on, but I'm her ex-husband. We're like family, so she'll forgive me, right? Brad pleaded. Don't make me laugh. You're a stranger. Once you're an ex, I don't even know you. You were in contact with another woman before our divorce was finalized and treated me like a maid. If not you, then who? I retorted. No, that's not what happened. I was just going along with what my mom said. She ordered me to do all this, Brad claimed. His mother confirmed that Brad had been trying to marry a young woman after our divorce, according to her information. He also quit his job to start his own business, but it failed within just a month. Despite having money, Brad was rejected by lenders and became reckless, engaging in irresponsible behavior such as playing and gambling, claiming he had money to spare. He admitted to having almost no money left, and it seemed that his financial situation was indeed dire. You brought this upon yourself. All this is Brad's fault, I asserted, despite their previous condescending attitudes towards me. They both desperately pleaded for forgiveness, attempting to shift the blame, but this was truly ridiculous. No, I won't forgive either of you. And this isn't something from the past, is it? You were treating me like a servant until a moment ago. Not leaving when I asked you to leave is illegal. And since the furniture collected by my late father-in-law is now mine, you'll need to compensate me for that. But all right, we will compensate you. Just please don't get the police involved. You wouldn't want me to go to jail, would you? They pleaded. Unmoved, I responded. I actually don't care at all. By the way, we're married. It turned out I was married to my former brother-in-law, Reagan. It hasn't even been a year, and you've moved on to another man, my own brother at that. What are you talking about? You moved on before you were even divorced, didn't you? You wouldn't return Daisy to me, no matter how many times I asked. Stop clinging to the past already. Brad was left speechless. I don't care anymore. I'll pay for whatever damages there are. How much for my idiot husband's junk? Well, if we calculate roughly, about $100,000. The furniture that my father-in-law had collected was all high-end pieces made by famous designers, I explained. Brad and his mother, who had no interest in these items, seemed to have believed they were just junk. You're going to compensate for what you've broken, right? We're not sure if we can get the same items, but make sure to pay properly. Unable to afford such compensation, Brad and his mother were distraught. For the time being, the police took the two of them away for trespassing and vandalism. Of course, I didn't forgive them and proceeded with the lawsuit. Afterwards, Brad and his mother, who were desperately seeking help from Reagan, were bluntly rejected. Reagan said, I'm ashamed to even be related by blood. Brad and his mother were likely receiving their just desserts together. And there's one more thing I kept secret. My father-in-law told me to sell the house and use the money as I wish. Regan had told me that the price of the house was $100,000. But in reality, the document stated the value of the house was around $500,000. It's a good location, so it might sell for a bit more. But for now, Regan and I decided to take it easy in the house my father-in-law left us, with no plans to sell it. Eventually, we planned to sell the land and build a new house. I had some worries about having children, so after getting married to Regan, I went to the gynecologist for a checkup. But there were no issues with either Regan or me. Now, with the troublemakers gone, Regan and I are living happily together. Before long, we'll be selling this house and moving into a high-rise condo. So you better start looking for a new place. Maggie's mother, Karen, sneered, "You're not thinking you'll get a dime of our father's inheritance, are you? We're having you relinquish your right to it. You got that, Ashley?" My sister threatened me, her face a horrifying mask of cruelty. Ashley's boyfriend stood to the side, his laughter only adding salt to the wound. It was unbearable. Our father's funeral had barely finished, and they dared to talk like this. "You heard the absolute worst. I can't stand this anymore. I'm cutting ties with you all." The moment I shouted those words, the doorbell rang. Standing there was a man I felt like I'd met before. "My name is Maggie. At 22, I'm soon to graduate from university. Nothing to brag, but I'm strong-willed and patient. From my childhood through university, I've always quietly and diligently focused on my studies. I've maintained reasonably high grades, and I do have dreams I want to fulfill. Although I'm content with my daily life, I'd also have a significant worry. Maggie, come downstairs now." A loud voice rang from below. With reluctance, I went downstairs to find my mother, Karen, and my sister, Ashley. "Mom, sis, what's up?" I was studying, as usual. "You nerd. You're still studying even though university is almost over. What a hard worker." The one laughing was my sister, Ashley. A beauty like our mother, she's flamboyant and was even a popular model back in the day. Now she's unemployed, under the gaze of helping around the house. "We're going shopping. You should clean the dishes and do the laundry. Don't forget to iron properly, okay? Also, we're out of detergent and other things, so you should go shopping." Mother calmly ordered me to do the housework, knowing she would get furiously angry if I talked back. I quietly responded, "Okay." I left the house stressed out to the nines and high in spirits. "I need to get on with that," I muttered quietly as I started to clean up the mess they had left behind. Mom, a former beauty queen, has extravagant tastes and loves luxury. She's always favored my beautiful sister while ignoring me since I'm not all that pretty. Moreover, they've always dumped housework and other chores on me as if I'm their maid. My sister took advantage of this, and I've been oppressed by them since I was little. Yet I've tolerated it because after all, we are family. And then my phone rang. When I looked at my phone screen, it read Dad. "Hello, Dad, it's been a while." I could tell my voice had brightened. "Oh, Maggie, it's been a while. Are you doing okay?" "I'm doing great. How about you, Dad? It's night there, right? How's work?" "I'd like to say I'm fine, but I've been having headaches lately. I'm planning to go see a doctor soon." "How's your schoolwork? Is it going well, Dad? Take care of yourself, okay? Thanks to you, everything is going well. I'm studying hard to achieve my dream." "That's my girl. You're always so diligent. Remember what I always say, be righteous and kind, right? Don't worry, I'm doing my best. That's my Maggie. I'll bring lots of souvenirs when I come home next time." After that conversation, I hung up the phone. To put it bluntly, my family is well off. This was largely due to my elite father, Harry, who has been flying around the world for work since his younger days. Although he was often away from home, he was kind to me and showered me with love whenever we had the chance to meet. I adored him dearly. However, to my mother, Karen, and my sister, Ashley, He was nothing more than an ATM. The harsh truth was that they were living lavishly on the money he earned. "Be righteous and kind, Maggie," he would say. His presence was always nurturing and supportive. He was my rock. That's why I was able to stay strong until now. Several months later, shortly after I graduated from university, a chilling event occurred. "Maggie, Dad has..." Karen burst into my room, her face as pale as a ghost. Apparently, my father had collapsed at the airport as soon as he returned home and was rushed to the hospital. Upon hearing the news, Ashley, Karen, and I immediately headed to the hospital. There, my once strong father lay frail and helpless. "We suspect he's had a stroke," the doctor informed us. Despite extensive treatment, my father barely improved. To be specific, he was left with severe physical paralysis and a speech impairment, unable to stand or converse properly. To care for my now dependent father, I decided to put my dreams on hold and dedicate myself to his care at home. Predictably, Karen and Ashley completely ignored him, treating him as if he was useless. They didn't even help with his care, let alone come by to see him. "Mom, Ashley, if you helped with Dad's care once in a while, I'm sure he'd be really happy," I pleaded. However, their response was always the same. "We're too busy. We've left Dad's care to you." "Dad, it was a lovely day today," I would tell him. "Thank you," he would struggle to reply. I studied and learned about caregiving. I made sure he could see outside by keeping the curtains open, fed him specially prepared meals, and arranged fresh flowers every day. Though I had help from professional caregivers, I did everything I could for him with all my heart, remembering my father who had worked so hard for us and showered us with love. I was desperate to do everything. Whenever times got tough, I would recall my father's words, "Maggie, always be righteous and kind," and each time it gave me the strength to carry on. One day, I overheard Karen and Ashley whispering in the house. "Thanks to Dad's insurance money, I was able to buy that bag I wanted," Karen said. "I know, right? Thanks, Dad. Maybe I should get a new wallet too," Ashley chimed in. I held back from yelling at them and continued to listen, only to hear Karen utter something even more shocking. "If Dad were gone, we'd receive a few $100 million from his life insurance and inheritance he's been saving up through his job and investments." "Wow, Mom. And we should totally buy a luxury condo, and my boyfriend could live with us. Oh, I wish Dad would hurry up and die." Indeed, I couldn't bear it any longer and left the scene. My father was struggling to stay alive, and yet they were spending his insurance money and dreaming about a luxury condo from his inheritance, wishing for him to die sooner. I felt like vomiting out of anger and despair. In reality, my mother and Ashley had been living it up recently, buying up brand name items and even leaving my father and me behind to go on overseas trips. But there was no way I could tell my father, who was already having such a hard time. I didn't want to sadden him. Pretending I hadn't heard my mother and Ashley's conversation, I devoted myself to taking care of my father. Many friends and acquaintances often came to visit him. They all loved him. I particularly remember an older man in a suit and glasses who often came. I wasn't present, but he was probably an executor from my father's company or something. He would bow his head and greet me whenever he saw me. I was happy that my father was loved, and on the days when he had visitors, his face seemed brighter. I thought these days would continue, but a few months later, my father had a stroke recurrence and suddenly passed away. I cried, clinging to my father's body that no longer spoke. Even my mother and Ashley shed tears this time, mourning the loss of my father. What followed was a whirlwind. There was a wake and a funeral to be held, and of course my mother, the chief mourner, did nothing. Neither did Ashley. In the end, I had to go through all the procedures by myself, running around in a rush. The wake ended, and many people attended the funeral, with numerous flowers arriving as well. Seeing the character and popularity my father had in life, I felt somewhat comforted. At the funeral, sobbing voices echoed, and my father, with a peaceful face, embarked on his journey. In the evening of the day when the first 7 days were over, I had finally started to recover a bit from the sadness. As I was cleaning up the 7th day, my mother and Ashley called me into the living room. Next to Ashley was a man who was said to be her fiancé. Like Ashley, he looked good, but given his former job as a male stripper, his inner frivolity was clear. Apparently, his name was John. So about father's inheritance, my mom began. I had a terribly bad feeling, and then my mother, laughing scornfully, said something outrageous. We'll get a lot from your father's inheritance, so we decided to sell this house and live in a luxury condo. So you should leave. Mom, it's only been a week since Dad passed away. Are you already talking about the inheritance and the luxury condo? We've already signed the contract. It's a high-rise, brand new. You've already signed. When did you? About a month ago, I guess. A month ago. But Dad was still doing fine. He was practically dying. He had a lot of money, so it'll work out fine. My mother was selfish as ever. Ashley continued, yes, that's right. The luxury condos for Mom, me, and my fiancé. So, you're a nuisance. You should hurry up and find some shabby apartment, okay? Even you, sis? Are you serious? Of course. Don't even think about getting any of Dad's inheritance. We'll have you renounce it. You understand, right? Ashley was approaching me with a terrifying expression, and next to her, her fiancé was laughing. Seeing my father's inheritance in the corner of my eye made me feel suffocated. It was too much. They had the nerve to say such things before my dad's mourning was even over. You guys are the worst. I can't stand it anymore. I'm cutting ties with both of you. We'd actually feel relieved if you cut ties with us. My mother and Ashley laughed at me. I clenched my fists and started trembling. At that moment, the front doorbell rang. Straightening my trembling breath and wiping my tears, I'd opened the door, thinking it might be a late visitor. Good evening, my condolences for your loss. The man who deeply bowed his head at the entrance was the middle-aged man in a suit and glasses who frequently visited my father's sickbed. Thank you. Please come in. As I was about to invite him in, the man presented his business card. Please check this. My name is Watson, an attorney assigned by your father. The business card indeed belonged to a law firm, and although I had not noticed it before, a badge denoting him as a lawyer was gleaming on his chest. A lawyer? I was surprised. My mother, Ashley, and her boyfriend came out from behind. What does a lawyer want from us? Watson responded to my mother's skeptical expression. I've come to discuss your husband's inheritance. Can we talk for a moment? Watson sat down in the living room. My mother sat directly across from him, and Ashley and her boyfriend sat next to her. I ended up sitting on the side facing them alone. Watson took out several documents from his bag, looked at us, and then began to speak slowly. First, may I read your husband's will? That man could barely move or speak, and yet he left a will. Get on with it, please. My mother spoke in an irritated tone. Then allow me to read it, Watson said in a quiet voice. The testator, Harry, hereby bequeaths as follows. The testator leaves all property belonging to him to his second daughter, Maddie. A moment of silence fell upon the room. The testator designates the following as the executor of the will. Before Watson could continue reading, Ashley interrupted. Wait a minute. What did you just say? Didn't you hear me? The testator designates the part before that. Let me read it again. The testator, Harry, hereby bequeaths all property belonging to him to his second daughter, Maddie. What does that mean? Karen, our mother, and Ashley exclaimed in unison. I was so shocked that I couldn't breathe, and all I could do was stare in astonishment. Watson continued, Next, I will read the postscript of the will, looking at me. In other words, this is your father's final message. I quietly listened as he read. Maggie, you gave up your precious dreams to take care of me. I wasn't able to pay much attention to you because I was always working, but I truly appreciate it. Thanks to you, I was able to pass away peacefully and fulfilled. Upon hearing my father's last words from Watson, tears started to well up in my eyes. Maggie, always be kind and correct. I know you can do it. Your father will always be watching over you. Please be happy. All I could do was sob in front of them while Karen and Ashley were making a big fuss. What does that mean? So the inheritance all goes to her? Yes. What happens to our money? In response to their outburst, Watson cast a brief glance at them. You two are not mentioned, by the way. Maggie is also the sole beneficiary of the life insurance. What are you talking about? Do you think that's allowed? Karen turned beet red, ready to burst at any moment. That's right. Isn't there something called a reverse portion that's supposed to be guaranteed to the wife and the children, right? Ashley leaned forward eagerly. You're referring to the statutory reserve. Indeed, you two have the right to claim a statutory reserve from the inheritance Maggie will receive, Watson said in a matter-of-fact tone. Of course, Karen seemed to be getting back to her usual self. Even if there is a will, if its contents are unfair, you can claim a share of the inheritance prescribed by the civil law. However, Watson continued, Harry had commissioned us to investigate the fact that you, Karen, and you, Ashley, were living luxuriously with Harry's money and squandering the insurance money. The eyes of Karen and Ashley widened in astonishment. Indeed, you purchased a luxury condominium and a car, and you spend quite lavishly on host clubs and overseas trips. All the caregiving and household chores were left to Maggie alone. Moreover, there were even remarks hoping for Harry's death. My father knew everything. He knew everything but pretended not to know. That's my mother. Stammered Watson responded calmly. In this case, it's unlikely that the distribution of the inheritance will be deemed unfair. Even if you take it to court, it's very unlikely you'll be able to claim anything. Of course, you can try if you wish. I'll be the one you'll be set up against. My mother's face had turned a pale blue. That's ridiculous, my sister also muttered. When Watson was leaving and I walked him out to the entrance, he said, Maggie, you have grown up to be quite admirable. Your father always spoke of you with such joy. Really, my father has known your father since we were young, and I was honored to take on this request. Your father felt he was too lenient with the other two, but I believe he found peace knowing how well you turned out. Watson's eyes were squinted in a warm smile. I was so touched that I teared up again. Please live a happy life from now on. You know I'm always here to help. Watson left me with those words, and I kept bowing deeply to him. A year later, with Watson's help, I was able to inherit all of my father's assets. As for my mother and sister, my mother, unable to pay off the loans for the high-rise condominium, had already contracted the expensive car and the designer goods, eventually went bankrupt. My sister, on the other hand, was quickly abandoned by her boyfriend when he learned that she wouldn't be inheriting anything. I heard through the grapevine that she's now living with my mother and working part-time. They called me for a while, but I kept replying, I've cut ties with you. Please contact me through a lawyer. I thought that was what my father wanted too. Now they don't contact me at all. As for me, I used my father's inheritance to attend a law school I had once given up on. Originally, I wanted to become a prosecutor to uphold my father's words, always be kind and correct. But now, my dream has changed. After working with Watson, who had saved me in my time of need and provided unwavering support, I started to admire being a lawyer myself. So now, I'm studying hard to become one. I strongly wish to become a lawyer like Watson, who is always just and kind.
Having made the decision to marry my boyfriend Ethan and paying a visit to his family's abode for introductions on the appointed day, I encountered a startling rejection from all his kin. Their chilling words echoed, "Never reach out to us again. Your voice is unwelcome." It seemed their upbringing, steeped in adulation for their physical charms, had fostered an environment of harshness and envy towards those who possessed what they lacked. Regrettably, I found myself the unwitting target of their jealousy, with even my father-in-law and brother-in-law silently aligning with their rejection. Yet, several months passed, I had the sweet satisfaction of orchestrating a masterful revenge upon these four. My name is Amy, age 27, now basking in serene and joyful days encircled by love for my husband, our cherubic child, and my own parents. The genesis of this newfound contentment traces back 3 years, when I was just 24. It all began with Ethan, my former colleague turned beau, who proposed to me. Bonding over our shared love for cinema, our friendship blossomed into romance through countless movie dates on our days off. Ethan's gentle demeanor and universal amiability endeared him to many at work. Averse to conflict, he possessed a forgiving nature that endeared him to all. From the moment I joined the company, Ethan intrigued me, so when he finally mustered the courage to ask me out, I was elated, eagerly anticipating each day at work. During moments of professional missteps and personal lows, he offered unwavering support, fostering a natural desire within me. I want to spend my life with this man. Ethan harbored ambitions of launching his own business down the line, and I was eager to stand by his side, offering unwavering support every step of the way. When he proposed to me, my heart soared with joy. There was no hesitation. I accepted his proposal without a second thought, resolved to spend my life with him. The weekend following Ethan's heartfelt proposal, we promptly journeyed to my family's abode, introducing Ethan to my parents and sharing our plans to wed. Ethan's warmth and charm extended effortlessly to my family, effortlessly bonding with my father over drinks and conversation. My parents, enchanted by Ethan's demeanor, readily embraced our union, reveling in our shared happiness. Witnessing Ethan effortlessly blend into my family dynamic, I couldn't help but feel blessed to have him in my life. As the weekend waned, our sights turned to meeting Ethan's family. While I realized I hadn't gleaned much about them from Ethan, I brushed aside any concerns, presuming his independence might have led to infrequent contact with his parents. The eve of our visit, during a casual phone call with Ethan discussing our plans for the morrow, he cryptically mentioned, "My parents might come off a bit peculiar, but don't dwell on it too much." His words sparked a twinge of apprehension, but with the early morning looming, I chose to set aside any worries and retire for the night around 10 p.m. The following day, Ethan and I rendered his vows at the station, embarking together towards his family residence. It marked my inaugural visit to his familial abode, and despite my attempts to quell my nerves, a persistent jitteriness lingered throughout the morning. Walking alongside Ethan, his words seemed to blur amidst the frantic thudding of my heart. Before us loomed a majestic mansion, reminiscent of a fairy tale castle. The sprawling garden only intensified my trepidation as I pondered Ethan's upbringing in such opulent surroundings. Yet, his reassuring smile offered some solace as he gently remarked, "Feeling nervous? It's all right, let's proceed." Upon the grand entrance, my mother-in-law greeted us warmly, her graceful demeanor and impeccable appearance exuding elegance. Her welcoming demeanor momentarily eased my apprehension. Once inside, the rest of the family, save for my mother-in-law, greeted me with smiles, alleviating some of my unease. Finding myself warmly embraced, I settled onto the sofa, engaging in pleasant conversation over dinner before proudly announcing our engagement to all present. Ethan's family beamed with delight, particularly my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who expressed their excitement at welcoming me into the family with endearing words. "We're thrilled to have such a charming addition to our family." Their warm reception touched me deeply, fostering a sense of belonging. As the pleasant conversation flowed, I learned more about Ethan's family. His father managed a successful company specializing in package tours, while his brother, an executive director within the same company, harbored aspirations of eventually assuming its leadership. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law gracefully balanced their roles as homemakers, enriching their lives with pursuits like dance classes and flower arrangement lessons. My sister-in-law, radiating confidence with her impeccable appearance, left a lasting impression. Meanwhile, my father-in-law's kindness and affable demeanor put me at ease, his engaging conversation effortlessly quelling any nerves. I found solace in his amiable presence, genuinely grateful for his warmth. However, the harmonious atmosphere was briefly disrupted by a question from my father-in-law, inquiring about my employment status at the same company as Ethan. I clarified that I held a permanent position, having joined as a regular employee following my graduation from Harvard University. His pride in my accomplishments was palpable, his admiration evident as he praised my achievements. The ensuing praise from both my father-in-law and Ethan left me feeling slightly embarrassed yet profoundly touched by their words of admiration and support. In reality, my journey led me to a prestigious university in the United States, where I dedicated myself to studies even at the expense of sleep during my high school years. My parents, despite limited means, toiled relentlessly to afford my college education. Fueled by a deep-seated determination to secure a promising career and ultimately repay my parents' sacrifices, I poured my heart into every endeavor. Engrossed in lively conversation with others, I couldn't help but notice the sudden silence from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. A pang of apprehension gripped me, prompting a frantic search for a change of topic. Observing a striking arrangement of flowers adorning the table, I ventured a compliment only to be met with a sharp retort from my mother-in-law, questioning the sincerity of my interest in housewives' pastimes, given my professional stature. Bewildered by her abrupt shift in demeanor, I struggled to comprehend the underlying hostility. Echoing her sentiments, my sister-in-law insinuated that my academic background might lead me to dismiss their pursuits as trivial. I never intended such implications, yet found myself at a loss for words, choking back tears of frustration. Ethan swiftly intervened, rebuking their baseless assumptions and defending my character. Though his words offered solace, I remained mute, unable to muster a response, my gaze fixed downward. Surveying the room, I noted my father-in-law, inebriated and slumbering on the sofa since noon, alongside my disinterested brother-in-law, idly scrolling through his phone. Sensing the palpable tension, Ethan tactfully suggested bringing the gathering to a close, offering a much-needed reprieve from the stifling atmosphere. As we made our way back to the station, Ethan offered his apologies, explaining, "I'm sorry about today. My mom and sister have quite the pride. They're particularly touchy about their high school education." Later, Ethan revealed that his mother-in-law had worked at a flower shop straight out of high school, where his father-in-law had become enamored with her at first sight. A captivating beauty, she drew numerous customers to the shop daily. Through persistent pursuit, his father-in-law won her affections, and they eventually married, with him still seemingly wrapped around her finger to this day. Similarly, his sister-in-law, a striking woman, had reconnected with Ethan's brother-in-law at a high school reunion in their early 20s. Enchanted by her transformation, he pursued her relentlessly until they became a couple. Like his father-in-law, Ethan's brother-in-law appeared to acquiesce to his wife's wishes without question. Despite my advanced education, I struggled to comprehend their insecurities. They were both beautiful women with devoted husbands who adored and protected them. Yet, I couldn't shake off a lingering sense of unease, questioning whether marriage would truly be as harmonious as I had envisioned. Nonetheless, with the family's blessings secured, we forged ahead with wedding plans, hoping that open communication would bridge any divides. "Rest assured, Amy, I'll always stand by your side," Ethan reassured me, instilling a sense of optimism within me. After months of meticulous planning, the day before our wedding arrived, only to be disrupted by an unexpected phone call from Ethan's mother. As Ethan's voice rose in disbelief, I listened in shock to his revelation that his parents had suddenly decided not to attend the wedding due to a forgotten trip they had booked for the same day. Stunned and bewildered by this unforeseen turn of events, we attempted to reach them for an explanation to no avail, met only by the incessant ringing of unanswered calls. Perplexed by the abrupt turn of events, we hastened to Ethan's parents' house, only to find it dark and deserted, indicating their absence. I voiced my concerns to Ethan, recalling the tense atmosphere during my previous visit, questioning if I had inadvertently offended his mother and sister. Ethan attributed their demeanor to their prideful nature, acknowledging that highly intelligent individuals often bore stubborn tendencies, but he remained uncertain of any specific grievances they held. Puzzled by his father's absence as well, Ethan explained that both his father and brother-in-law were inclined to defer to their wives, likely aligning with them to avoid discord. His distress was palpable, leaving me at a loss for words. Ultimately, our attempts to contact Ethan's family proved futile, compelling us to proceed with the wedding sans their presence. We were left bewildered by the unfolding events, questioning the reasons behind their absence. Even if they genuinely forgot about their trip, I struggled to comprehend why they would prioritize it over their son's wedding. Upon learning of Ethan's family's absence, my own parents expressed understanding, though their expressions betrayed a hint of complexity, burdening me with a sense of guilt for causing them distress on what should have been a joyous occasion. During the reception, murmurs circulated among our guests, questioning the absence of Ethan's parents. Even our boss, who graciously offered a toast, inquired about their whereabouts, leaving us grappling for an appropriate response. Faced with the dilemma of revealing the truth, we opted to deflect inquiries by attributing their absence to illness. What was meant to be a day of celebration turned into one fraught with mental exhaustion. Days later, when Ethan and I visited his parents to relay the events of the ceremony, his mother's nonchalant demeanor and lack of remorse stung deeply. Suppressing my sadness to maintain familial harmony, I responded with a strained smile, concealing the hurt that lingered within. Ethan's voice cut through the tension like a knife, his words echoing with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. Canceling the day before the wedding, with all our relatives absent, is that even acceptable? If you had no intention of attending, you shouldn't have accepted the invitation in the first place. His sister-in-law's response only added fuel to the fire. I would have attended if Amy wasn't the bride, she declared coldly, leaving me utterly bewildered, my head spinning with confusion. Before I could make sense of her words, Ethan's mother-in-law launched her own accusation, attempting to deflect blame onto me. Don't lay all the blame on us. I wanted to witness my son's special day, but Amy ruined it. I'm a victim here too. I demand an apology. Ethan, sensing my shock, rallied to my defense. How can you blame Amy? She's done nothing wrong, he retorted, his voice tinged with incredulity. But the silence of Ethan's father-in-law, until now, was ominous. When he finally spoke, it was with a venomous intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Enough is enough. How dare you barge in here on our day off to complain? Is that all you came for? Get out. His words were like a slap in the face, and before we could even process what was happening, we found ourselves forcibly ejected from their home. As I hastily slipped on my shoes at the entrance, my mind reeled with shock and disbelief, struggling to comprehend the sudden turn of events. A sharp sting on the sole of my foot jolted me into a panic. Ouch! I exclaimed, lifting my foot to find a caterpillar wriggling inside my shoe. Recoiling with disgust, I hastily kicked off my shoe and fled outside, releasing the creature into the open air. As I stood, one shoe on, catching my breath, I noticed my mother-in-law and sister-in-law watching, their laughter laced with a malicious edge. "Are you all right?" they asked, their concern ringing hollow. Eager to escape the uncomfortable situation, I mumbled an apology and made a swift exit, only to be halted by my mother-in-law's unexpected words. "Amy, please refrain from involving yourself in our affairs except for weddings and funerals," she said, her tone final as she shut the door, leaving me bewildered and hurt. What had I done to deserve such treatment? All I wanted was to foster a positive relationship with Ethan's family. On the journey home, Ethan showered me with apologies, assuring me that I needn't endure any further interactions with his family. Despite his efforts to console me, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt and confusion. The revelation that my presence had caused such disdain from his mother-in-law and sister-in-law weighed heavily on my mind, leaving me questioning my worth. The next day brought a new wave of distress as my entire body erupted in intense itching. Rushing to the mirror, I was greeted with the sight of fiery red swelling covering my skin. A visit to the dermatologist revealed that the cause was caterpillar stings from the previous day. The itching was unbearable, robbing me of sleep for weeks on end. Recalling an unsettling incident at Ethan's house, where I had noticed my brother-in-law tampering with my shoes at the front door, I couldn't shake the feeling of distrust towards my in-laws. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Ethan fell ill and was hospitalized with stomach pains, diagnosed with a suspected gastric ulcer. Worried sick, I insisted he take time off work and accompanied him to the hospital for further tests, grappling with the mounting challenges that seemed to plague us relentlessly. I hesitated, recalling the blunt instruction to only reach out in the event of a wedding or funeral. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to keep Ethan's hospitalization a secret from his parents. Gathering my courage, I dialed their number, my hand trembling as the phone rang, nerves twisting my stomach into knots. The mere sound of my mother-in-law's voice filled me with a profound sense of dislike, a testament to the strained relationship that had developed between us. "Hello," she answered. "It's Amy. I apologize for not keeping in touch. There's something I need to tell you," I began tentatively. "Ethan has been hospitalized. They suspect it might be a gastric ulcer, so he's undergoing tests," I explained, hoping for a shred of concern or empathy. "A gastric ulcer, huh? Probably from overworking," she dismissed callously. "Please spare me from such trivial matters. I'm busy," she added, brushing off Ethan's health concerns with callous indifference. "Trivial? Don't you care about Ethan?" I retorted, my frustration bubbling over. "I won't bother you anymore. I'll call Ethan directly," I concluded, my voice thick with disappointment. Before I could hang up, my brother-in-law abruptly took the phone. "You're too persistent. Can't you read the room?" he chastised. "Whether Ethan's in the hospital or not, your constant calls are irritating," he snapped before ending the call abruptly. The abrupt click of the line cutting off left me reeling, a surge of indignation coursing through me. The callous rejection from my in-laws, their harsh words cutting deeper than I had anticipated, shattered any lingering hope of reconciliation. In that moment, I made a solemn vow to myself. If they don't want me to contact them, fine. I want nothing to do with that family anymore. I'll never reach out to them again, no matter the circumstances. Following Ethan's recovery, which proved to be a mild gastric ulcer, he diligently adhered to medication, experiencing a notable improvement in his health. I recounted the entire ordeal to Ethan, who met my explanation with unwavering determination. "Let's distance ourselves from my family," he declared firmly. "The only person who matters to me now is you, Amy. If they can't accept you, then they're not family to me, regardless of blood ties." A year later, Ethan took the leap to pursue his long-standing aspiration of establishing a software sales business, leveraging his prior job experience. His relentless dedication paid off as he tirelessly worked towards realizing his dream. While our venture was still in its nascent stage, witnessing even a fraction of Ethan's vision materialize filled me with profound joy. Our happiness only multiplied with the arrival of our healthy baby boy a year into Ethan's entrepreneurial journey. My parents shared in our elation, frequently visiting us despite the lengthy journey from their home to ours. We opted not to inform Ethan's parents of our son's birth, certain that their indifference would remain unchanged. Their silence following our earlier confrontation offered a sense of relief, freeing us from the burdensome ties of a strained relationship. Several months later, as the global pandemic of the new coronavirus swept across the world, our country declared a state of emergency, urging citizens to stay indoors. News broadcasts were inundated with discussions of the pandemic's impact, particularly on industries such as restaurants and tourism. My heart ached for those affected, though I couldn't help but wonder about Ethan's father's package tour company. Yet it was a passing thought, and any satisfaction I derived from imagining its plight was fleeting. Despite the challenging circumstances, Ethan's business flourished. While the initial phase of our entrepreneurial journey saw some financial instability, recent months had brought a surge in income, surpassing even Ethan's earnings as an employee. Our future looked promising, a testament to our resilience in the face of adversity. During this period, Ethan began receiving numerous calls from his parents' home. Despite the persistent attempts at communication, Ethan appeared determined to avoid any interaction, intentionally ignoring the calls and disregarding voicemails left behind. I often reassured him, "You don't need to worry about me. It's all right to reach out to them." While I held a deep-seated disdain for his family, I couldn't shake the guilt of causing Ethan to sever ties with his own parents. Yet Ethan remained resolute in his stance, affirming, "Amy is my top priority, not my parents. If they can't accept you, regardless of their parental status, I can't hold them in high regard." I felt a mix of remorse and admiration for Ethan's unwavering loyalty. Despite Ethan's steadfast avoidance, the persistence of his parents was relentless. Daily calls went unanswered, and then one day, a letter arrived from his family home, bearing a startling message. "Our business is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, and urgent financial discussions are necessary," it read. Their audacity was staggering, considering the estranged relationship they had imposed. We refused to entertain their demands, opting instead to let them face the consequences of their actions. "Let them face the repercussions of their decisions," I remarked. Soon enough, my own phone began to ring incessantly. Occupied with work, I couldn't attend the calls, but a voicemail left a clear indication of Ethan's continued avoidance. It seemed they had resorted to contacting me despite my explicit instructions to the contrary. Reluctantly, I listened to the message left on my voicemail, which simply stated, "Is this Amy's number? If Ethan persists in his silence, I'll visit in person. Let him know." 2 days following the voicemail, Ethan and I found ourselves enjoying a rare day off together at home. Just as we settled in after lunch, the doorbell chimed, signaling an unexpected visitor. Peering through the monitor, I was met with the sight of my 4 in-laws standing at the doorstep. Surprised, I looked at Ethan, who let out a weary sigh. "We could just ignore them. They'll eventually give up," he suggested. However, I couldn't shake the sense of pity. "They've come all this way. It wouldn't hurt to let them in," I countered. After a brief moment of contemplation, Ethan relented, unlocking the door to face whatever awaited us on the other side. Pitiful. Never would I entertain such thoughts about our cunning in-laws. I resolved silently, deliberately withholding the voicemail's revelation from Ethan. Everything was orchestrated to draw them into our home. My faint surprise at their arrival was a well-rehearsed act. I knew their persistence would eventually lead them to our doorstep. There was a method to my apparent madness. The true retaliation had yet to unfold, and it was time for a showdown. As the entire in-law clan stood at our front door, marching in without restraint upon entry, I couldn't help but express my exasperation. "Is it really that difficult to just open a door? It's simply uncouth," I remarked with thinly veiled frustration. Observing our son engrossed in play with his toys on the floor, Ethan's mother couldn't resist a remark. "Whose child is this?" she inquired. "He's our son," I replied matter-of-factly. "Ah, I recall now. Since you insisted we cease contact, I saw no need to inform you of his arrival." "Clearly, your interest is lacking," she retorted dismissively. Her contemptuous gaze met mine, and she muttered disparagingly under her breath. I found myself relishing a moment and turned to address Ethan's father. "What brings you here today?" A courtesy call would have been appreciated, I stated, my tone tinged with sarcasm. Ethan's father bristled at my remark. "Didn't you receive the letter?" he retorted sharply. "You mean the one that arrived 2 days ago?" I countered, noting the frustration in his tone. "If you had bothered to read it, you'd know we required urgent communication," he snapped back, his anger palpable. Swiftly, I retorted, "You made it clear you wanted nothing to do with us anymore, so I assumed contacting you was unnecessary." Suppressing a grin as I faced the stern quartet, I noticed Ethan, my husband, remaining silent, allowing me to speak my mind freely. It was characteristic of him to gauge the situation adeptly. It seemed unfathomable that he was raised by parents lacking such basic sensibilities. Abruptly, my father-in-law's demeanor shifted, transitioning to a pleading tone. "Please apologize for the past. The ongoing COVID situation has devastated our travel business. With cancellations piling up and no new bookings in sight, we're facing ruin. Can't you assist me with some financial aid?" In response, I maintained, "While I empathize with your predicament, I cannot readily aid someone who previously disavowed any connection with me. However, genuine displays of sincerity might sway my decision." Outraged, my father-in-law attempted intimidation, his expression contorted in fury. Unfazed, I resolved to handle the situation on my terms. "You're free to leave if you don't agree," I declared calmly. As my father-in-law persisted in pleading, beseeching me for assistance, I remained resolute. Eventually, he implored the others to apologize, leading to a collective plea from the entire group. In response, I politely declined their appeals, maintaining my composure. Enraged, my father-in-law slammed his hand on the table, his anger palpable as he grabbed my collar, accusing me of arrogance amid his attempts at reconciliation. Taken aback by his sudden aggression, I was about to intervene when Ethan stepped in, asserting, "Dad, don't lay a hand on Amy." My father-in-law retorted, "You're choosing your wife over your parents' plea." Ethan remained firm, stating, "Amy is my priority. I can't condone mistreatment towards her, even from my own parents. I won't accept superficial apologies just for money. If you can't sincerely apologize to Amy, then leave." Enraged by Ethan's stance, my father-in-law lashed out, landing a punch squarely on Ethan's face. Shocked and struggling to comprehend the violence unfolding, I attempted to reason with my father-in-law. But he was beyond reason, relentlessly kicking Ethan as he lay on the ground. Desperate to intervene, I tried to restrain my father-in-law, but he shrugged me off, causing me to collide with the table, resulting in a painful impact to my head. As I touched the back of my head, I felt the warmth of blood trickling down my fingers. The other 3 family members, frozen in shock, watched as my father-in-law continued his rampage, demanding money and ransacking the room. In a moment of desperation, I opened the balcony window and cried out for help to the passersby below, screaming that I was in danger. Within minutes, the police arrived. Upon their arrival, my father-in-law swiftly changed his demeanor, feigning innocence and dismissing the chaos as a misunderstanding. He attempted to paint me as intoxicated and delusional, trying to downplay his violent outburst with a disarming smile. I recounted to the officer, "Please apprehend this man. He assaulted both my husband and me, and he's been ransacking our home, demanding money." In response, my father-in-law vehemently denied the accusations and, with a burst of anger, punched a hole in the wall. Without hesitation, the officers arrested him on the spot. Subsequently, the other 3 family members were also taken in for questioning. It became apparent that my father-in-law would spend some time in jail. Thankfully, Ethan only sustained a minor injury, a cut and bruise on his cheek that healed quickly. However, the wound on the back of my head required 10 stitches, turning out to be more serious than initially thought. While I feel a pang of guilt for Ethan's injury, a sense of relief washes over me knowing that my in-laws have ceased their demands for money, possibly reflecting on their actions. As I later discovered, my father-in-law initially spoke highly of me, but my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's jealousy led them to manipulate him and my brother-in-law into treating me poorly. It's astounding how envy can alter one's behavior so drastically, leading to unforeseen consequences. It serves as a sobering reminder of the unpredictable nature of human emotions and the potential repercussions that follow. As anticipated, my in-laws faced financial ruin, their business collapsed, and their home was repossessed. Now, they reside in a modest apartment, both nearing their 70s and struggling to secure employment. My brother-in-law, once privileged by his father's position, now languishes in a cycle of gambling at the casino, nearing 50 with no marketable skills. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law's attempts at job hunting are thwarted by her demanding demeanor, leaving her confined to their home. Following that turbulent incident, my father retired, prompting a decision for my parents and us to cohabit. Surprisingly, it was Ethan who proposed this arrangement out of concern for my parents' well-being in their twilight years. With my return to work, my parents graciously care for our son during the day, providing me with a sense of security in juggling childcare and my career. Surrounded by my beloved husband, caring parents, and our cherished son, life couldn't be more fulfilling. I am determined never to take this happiness for granted and to always remain grateful for the blessings bestowed upon us.
Mom, I can't continue living like this. Ethan and his mom barely let me eat. A sudden SOS call interrupted my distress. "Ilana, come back home," I instinctively shouted. Ilana had become worryingly thin. I won't forgive Ethan and his mother, I resolved with determination. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jonna, a 50-year-old housewife. My husband James is 52 and works for a company. Our daughter is turning 26, having graduated from college and landed a job at a major corporation. She started living alone, and James and I were enjoying our life as a couple. Despite her success, Ilana was shy around men and hesitant in relationships. When she finally got a boyfriend, James and I were overjoyed. James kept urging her to bring him over, asking, "What's he like? Bring him home sometime." I cautioned James, "Honey, don't push her. She'll introduce him when she's ready. Let's wait patiently." Ilana soon smiled and said she'd bring Ethan over. "Dad, you kept insisting, so I complained to Ethan. He agreed to come over to meet you, but don't say anything weird to him, okay?" James was visibly delighted when Ethan came to greet us. James and I were nervous, but Ethan's friendly conversation soon eased our tension. Ethan introduced himself, saying, "Hello, I'm Ethan Smith, and I'm seriously dating Alana with the intention of marrying her. Alana blushed and said, "Marrying Ethan? You're embarrassing me. You said it was just a casual greeting." James happily told Alana, "No, it's great that he's thinking about the future. Ethan, I entrust Alana to you." Their relationship progressed smoothly with our blessing, and Ethan proposed formally 5 months later. Seeing a blushing but happy Alana made both James and me very happy. I heard Ethan worked for a major bank system company, and James and I discussed how their future seemed secure. As wedding preparations began, Alana frequently sought advice. One day, she asked, "Hey Mom, how much is the market price for a wedding ring?" "Ethan is planning to buy one for about $10,000. Surprised, I replied. "For wedding rings, maybe about $2,500 each for the couple. I've heard engagement rings are around $3,500. Alana seemed a bit uneasy. I felt the same way after asking around and reading magazines. Ethan's sense of money was odd. However, when Alana said, "Ethan insists it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing and wants me to have something nice," I conveniently interpreted it as Ethan wanting to give her a special gift. After some time, the two moved out of their bachelor's residence and into a condominium in New York. The area was very expensive but convenient for commuting. I expressed my concern to Alana, saying, "Hey Alana, the area you and Ian live in must be pretty expensive to rent, right? Are you going to be able to afford the monthly payments?" She reassured me, "Don't worry, Mom. Ian's working hard and earns a decent salary too. His job requires living near the bank. Ethan is a systems engineer at a bank-rated systems company. If there is a problem, Ethan needs to rush to the site even in the middle of the night. That's why the location had to be close to the bank, within a short taxi ride." Apparently, Alana explained, "Ethan's company gives a substantial housing allowance, so we're fine. Don't worry, Mom." Not fully understanding the system company's situation, I just accepted it as how things were. Months passed, and I invited Alana for lunch before her marriage. Alana and I often went for lunch together. However, after her marriage, when I invited her to join me, she often declined, citing being busy with work or having made other plans. James suggested that maybe she's just busy with her married life, but it didn't seem like Alana was avoiding me. Over the phone, Alana said, "Next Saturday." "Oh, that's when Ethan is on a business trip." "Sure, Mom, I can make it. I'll find a place for us." I was a bit thrilled to have lunch with my daughter after half a year. When I finally saw Alana, she looked a bit pale. Concerned, I said, "Alana, what's wrong? If you're not feeling well, take it easy. Just stay home and rest, okay?" Alana reassured me, "No, I'm fine. I've just been tired from MDI overtime lately. Plus, lunch with you might be just what I need to unwind." She managed a weak smile, and we enjoyed a good chat, just the two of us. About 2 hours in, Alana's phone rang. She looked shocked when she saw the display. Alana told me, "Mom, I have to go home already. Ethan's mother is calling." She explained that Ivy was at their place. Surprised, I said, "Sorry for keeping you during such a busy time." Alana reassured me, "It's okay. You can hurry back." Apologizing, Alana quickly left. Another half a year went by, and during this time, something terrible happened to Alana. I learned about it from a phone call from her. It was a sad day, and James and I were enjoying our day off. While I was making her tea, suddenly my phone rang. The display showed Alana. I quickly answered, and Alana hesitantly started, "Mom, it's me." I. She seemed unable to continue, and sensing something was wrong, I asked, "What's the matter? Did something happen?" Alana remained silent for a while. Patiently, I waited for her to start talking. Eventually, she said, "Mom, I can't live like this anymore. Ethan and his mom barely let me eat. I might not survive if this continues." Shocked, I asked, "Are you okay? Sounds like things are really bad. Why don't you come back home?" Alana seemed undecided. I firmly told her, "If you're feeling unwell, you can just sit around idly. Come back home. We'll talk it over when you get here." Ilana responded, "Really? Can I come back? But I don't have any money. I can't leave." I thought this was strange. Ilana was earning a decent salary, but there was no time for a long discussion. Her situation sounded serious. First, I needed to meet with Ilana to see how she is doing. I instructed Ilana, "Take only your valuables with you and leave the house. There's a convenience store near your apartment, right? I will drive there and pick you up. Wait for me there." Sobbing, Ilana agreed. James and I hurried to the convenience store. When we arrived, Ilana was crouched in the parking lot. She saw me and said, Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done this." She broke down and cried. I hugged Ilana, and together with James, we helped her into the car. She was terribly thin and almost gray in complexion. I was astonished, wondering what could have happened to her. I held Ilana until she stopped crying. James said to me, "She will not be able to come down here. Let's take her home soon and give her a good rest. We need to talk to Ethan." I agreed with James, stating, "Yes, right now letting Ilana rest is our top priority." When we arrived home, Ilana, possibly due to exhaustion, immediately fell asleep on the sofa. After she woke up, I served her some easy-to-eat food. She ate voraciously in front of us, indicating how hungry she must have been. It was shocking to hear her stories about not being allowed to eat and having no money. I asked Ilana, "What do you mean you're not allowed to eat?" Ilana explained, "My salary is lower than Ethan's, so Ethan and his mom Ivy keep telling me to save more." Gradually, my food portions were reduced. I asked, "Really? But you're making the food, right? Because you're a married couple, and you eat the same food, right?" Ilana shook her head, saying, "No. For the past 6 months, Ivy has been cooking Ethan's meals. I'm not even allowed in the kitchen." James asked, "Ellen, Ivy is in your house. This is the first time I'm hearing about this. Does this mean Ivy is staying there all the time?" Ilana explained that Ivy had moved in with them about 6 months ago, and they started living together gradually, right around the time Ilana and I had lunch. Ivy had an argument with her husband and came to stay with Ian for just a week. But then Ethan got mad at his father and told Ivy she could stay indefinitely. I was shocked and glanced at James, who seemed to feel the same. Ilana continued, "Since then, Ivy has been criticizing my budgeting, saying it's all wrong and that I can't manage money at all." After Ivy criticized the budget, she took control of the household finances. Moreover, Ethan did not oppose Ivy at all and instead joined her in blaming me. Now Ivy is controlling Ethan's and my entire salary. Ilana said, "Ivy saw my pay slip and demanded I work more, including overtime. Ivy told me, 'Your salary is much lower than Ethan's. Leave the housework to me and work more. How about doing more overtime?' Ian also told Ilana, 'Yes, that's right. I agree with more overtime. It's nice to have my mom doing the housework. You're lucky, Ilana.'" Ivy scrutinized Ilana's pay slips, always looking for unnecessary expenses, and eventually found something else to criticize: the cafeteria deductions. Ilana's company has a cafeteria, and lunch costs are deducted from her salary. Ivy told Ilana, "You're spending too much on lunch. I'll make you a lunchbox from now on. Stop eating at the cafeteria." Ilana's attempts to argue were met with attacks from both Ivy and Ethan. Ilana confided, "Whenever I try to speak up, Ivy and Ethan gang up on me. It never ends up being a calm discussion." Ilana said something, but her words were suppressed by Ivy and Ethan. Now, Ethan and Ivy control all of Ilana's salary, leaving her with almost no money of her own. When Ilana wanted to go to the hair salon, Ivy called it extravagant and reluctantly gave her money. Ivy also complained about Ilana's makeup being too expensive, telling her to buy cheaper products. Ilana can't even buy new clothes, but Ivy never complains about Ethan's spending. Ethan seems to spend money lavishly. Ilana told me the other day, Ethan bought a branded watch. He told me that because of his job, he would be treated like an idiot if he didn't wear something decent. Ethan has a reckless way of spending his money. Ilana began to sob as she recalled these painful events. James and I listened in disbelief. Then, Ilana's phone rang. She flinched and turned pale. I instinctively answered the phone for her. It was Ivy. So, isn't this Ilana's phone? Why is Johnny answering? Ivy asked. I replied, hello, it's been a while. Ilana is not feeling well. I can talk to you on her behalf. Ivy said, is that so? Well, all right. Could you tell Ilana to come back home soon? I replied, unfortunately, I can't do that. Aylin is unwell. She'll stay here until she recovers. Ivy retorted, you're coddling her too much. As a mother, you should educate Ellen properly. She can't manage a budget or do household chores. It's always one problem after another. Struggling to find the right words, I remained silent. Then, Ivy changed the topic, asking, so, Ilana will be commuting to work from your home? I replied, yes, considering her health, we'll need to discuss this with her company. But for now, she'll be commuting from here. Ivy then said, please tell Ilana to return as soon as she's well. I responded, excuse me, Ivy, but I think it's necessary for us, including Ethan, to have a discussion about the future living arrangements. Ivy snorted and said, fine, we can talk any time, before hanging up. I couldn't understand why Ivy was so confident, but at least Ilana was safe for now. We needed to focus on her health and feelings and plan our next steps. That night, after Ilana went to sleep, James and I discussed the situation. The next day, Ilana was examined at a hospital. As expected, she was underweight and not sleeping well. After talking with her, we decided she should take a leave of absence from work. She enjoyed my cooking, saying it was delicious. I asked her, what were you eating while living with Ian? What kind of meals did Ivy prepare for you? Ilana said, my mother-in-law only cooks for Ethan and herself. I always had bread ends from a local bakery. They sell bread very cheaply. That's what I used to eat. I was shocked. Ellen had been deprived of proper meals, while Ivy and Ethan ate normally, just bread ends. Since 3 months ago, Ivy had stopped her from eating at the company cafeteria. My lunchbox was just bread ends in a container. I was embarrassed, so I ate secretly in the break room when no one was around, Ilana said. Ivy would taunt her about not earning as much as Ethan, saying with her salary, bread ends were all she deserved. She had been living on just bread ends for 3 months. I was shocked, and James, who heard everything, couldn't hide his surprise. Tired from sharing, Ilana lay down to rest. James told me, this is serious. We need to investigate further. If Ian or Ivy calls again, by some time, I'll gather more information. I told James, yes, I think this is going too far. Then James and I began looking into Ilana's circumstances. I started by calling her work colleague, who said, recently, Ilana has been doing a lot of overtime and looked pale. She often declined after-work drinks, saying she couldn't go because of her husband and mill. James also talked to Ilana's boss. Ilana's boss mentioned, I've been concerned about Ilana lately because she's been doing too much overtime. She seemed desperate to work. Ilana's boss commented, Aylin is so conscientious. Maybe she's been pushing herself too hard. I hope she recovers soon and comes back to us. Thanks to her boss's initiative, Ileana was granted sickness allowance by her company. The allowance was 2/3 of her salary, but we were grateful to receive it. We decided to have the sickness allowance paid into a different account from her usual salary account. 2 weeks after Ileana returned home, Ethan called. He insisted Ileana should be well by now. When I looked at James, he answered the phone. James humbly requested Ethan, Ileana is not fully recovered yet. Please let her rest for another week. Ethan told James over the phone, I guess there's no choice. Just 1 more week, okay? And then hung up. I protested to James, saying she needs at least 3 more weeks to recover, and we don't know what they'll do to her if she goes back. James reassured me, don't worry, we won't stick to the 1-week timeline. They've treated her terribly, and we have a plan. He then asked Ileana, What do you want to do? If you want to try again with Ethan, we won't stop you. But if you want to leave him, we'll support you." Ileana, suddenly resolute, said, "I've been thinking. Am I really as useless as Ivy and Ethan say? But this isn't right. They're just taking my money. I don't want this anymore. I want a divorce." James encouraged her, saying, "That's right. You've chosen your path. We'll always be on your side." James shared the information he had gathered with us. We prepared for the possibility of Ethan coming over, ready to handle the situation. 1 week passed, and we didn't contact Ian. 9 days later, Ethan and Ivy came to visit. When the doorbell rang, I checked the intercom and informed Ileana and James. James suggested, "Let's talk to them directly and settle this." Ileana nodded in agreement. Opening the door, we found Ethan and Ivy glaring at us. Calming myself, I greeted them warmly. "Hello, what brings you here so suddenly?" Ethan demanded. "Why hasn't Ileana returned home? It's been a week. You did tell her, right?" Ivy also chimed in. "That's right. You can't do your chores, you can't do your laundry, and you can't even keep your promise to come home. What a mess you are. Parents and children are helpless." Inviting them in, I said, "Let's not talk in the doorway. Please come inside." Reluctantly, they entered. Ileana told them firmly, "I won't return to that house, Ethan. Please, let's divorce. I can't live with you anymore." Ethan threatened loudly, "You think you can just decide that?" But Ileana stood her ground, facing Ethan with resolve. Ivy then berated Ileana, saying, "For 6 months, I did all the housework and supported Ethan while you neglected your duties." Ileana countered, "It's not that I didn't do the chores. Whenever I did, you would criticize my methods and take over the tasks, didn't you?" Ivy retorted, "How dare you speak to me like that after making me work so hard? You should be ashamed." "I was only trying to correct your mistakes," Ethan joined in. "That's right, my mother helped because you couldn't handle the chores, allowing you to focus on work," he added. That's when James shouted at them, "What nonsense! You took Eileen's salary and fed her only bread ends. Your actions are the worst kind of abuse." They were shocked by James' outburst. James added, "Ethan, you have been fired from your company. I checked out your employment status. You don't have the power to continue paying the rent on that apartment anymore, do you?" Ethan began to look uneasy. Ileana added, "I didn't know until Dad told me." James continued, "I hired a detective to find out Ian. You were fired 6 months ago for an affair with your boss's wife." Ileana accused Ethan, "You pushed me to work because you lost your job and income." Ethan turned pale and hung his head. James then confronted Ivy. "You have a shopping addiction, and that's right, you didn't leave your home due to a fight, but because you were divorced and had nowhere to go." Ivy lost her composure and turned pale. James concluded, "Ethan is being sued for alimony, and Ivy is being chased by debt collectors. They were trying to pass their debts onto Ileana." Ileana, trembling with anger, placed a piece of paper on the desk. She said, "Once and for all, let's divorce. I filled out half of the divorce form. You complete it and submit it to the authorities. We'll communicate through lawyers from now on." Ethan, prostrating at Ileana's feet on the carpet, pleaded, "Please don't say we should divorce. It was just a moment of madness. I was wrong to hide it from you. You're all I have, Ilana. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." Ivy, also appealing to Ileana, cried, "I did all the housework and took care of everything, didn't I? I'm sorry, please come back. I'll keep doing the chores." Ileana, looking at Ethan and Ivy coldly, said, "I'm fed up. Who would want to start over with you two? You hid what you did and exploited my salary. I don't want to see your faces." Ethan and Ivy were unable to move from their spot, crying inconsolably. James sternly told them, "The conversation is over. It's time for you to leave. If you don't, we have our ways to deal with it." Reluctantly, Ethan and Ivy stood up and left our home defeated. Afterward, with a lawyer's help, Ileana and Ethan officially divorced. Of course, we filed for alimony from Ethan. In addition to hiding his affair, We also added the fact that Ethan did not provide adequate meals to Elena in the alimony claim. We had a doctor's diagnosis, which served as conclusive evidence against Ethan. Ethan had to move out of the apartment and live in a cheaper one with Ivy. Now he's working day and night to pay the alimony to Ileana, and Ivy, not working, has become the target of Ethan's anger, and they constantly fight. Our lawyer informed us about Ethan and Ivy's current situation. Ilan fully recovered and returned to work. Ileana seems to be enjoying her work more than ever. She apologized to me and James, saying, "I'm sorry for being a burden and coming back home. Thank you for all your help with the divorce. I'll be staying here for a while." I hugged her, saying, "Divorce doesn't matter. The fact that you're alive and well is all that matters to us." James added, "Don't overdo it. You're a hard worker, and sometimes you keep things to yourself too much." Ileana admitted, "I should have talked to you both sooner. I tried to handle too much on my own." Seeing Ileana's smile return was truly heartwarming, and James, who stood by us and fought against Ethan and Ivy, proved to be incredibly reliable. I fell for him all over again. When I told him, he joked, "Then how about showing your gratitude with food? Make my favorite pork cutlets tonight as a family. We've overcome difficulties and will surely face more in the future, but with James and Ileana by my side, I want to support each other as a family."